right, you're live.
Whatever you say. It's on you.
Wow.
We're ready. Will you please call the roll?
All right. Mr. Anderson.
Here.
Ms. Capel.
Here.
Mr. McDade. Ms. McNabb.
Here.
Ms. Mumford.
Here.
Mr. Norton.
Here.
Mr. O'Connell.
Here.
Ms. Ray.
Here.
And Ms. Stubblefield.
Here.
You have a quorum.
All right. And we're asked to approve the minutes from the December meeting.
I'll make the motion.
Second.
You want to do that by acclamation?
Yep. All in favor? Yes.
Aye.
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 Any opposed?
All right, motion passes.
All right. So, are there any citizen comments tonight?
Do y'all want to do those first?
Yeah.
Okay.
Instead of what?
Instead of y'all talking first.
Oh, we don't need to talk.
At all.
Let's
Come on
hold it,
up.
let's hold it to whatever, it's 3 minutes.
3 minutes, and we're gonna have, this is new, we're gonna have the timer on the screen.
High tech.
We're gonna try. Okay,
Leave me out.
so. Give me 1 second. The first person who wants to come up who's ready to speak?
Hello, my name is Ben. I live on the east side. I'm a long-term renter, 10 years.
Ben, can you give us your last name?
McDonald, MacDonald.
And your address?
5th block east side. Can we do that? Is that good
I
enough?
don't know, is it?
That's good.
Okay, cool. And I just, I've been active with some of the council members and other groups working towards the long-term, short-term rental issues we've been discussing over the last couple of years. And I just thought it was important to give a perspective of a long-term renter, kind of who's dealt with these battles over the last couple of years specifically, after not having an issue for the majority of the beginning of my time on Folly. To talk a bit about the struggles to work out here. I've spent years working in food and beverage out here. I've kind of segued away from that. I do work at home now, but I'm still in touch with a lot of that community. And I know you guys are thinking about how to propose, from what I understand, maybe some methods of allowing socioeconomically challenged citizens or residents to be able to kind of supplement some of their income, is what it sounds like from what I've read. And I think in order to build a community like we've had out here and to continue to have a thriving community, it's very important that we talk about this issue seriously. As someone who's watched 80%, maybe 90% of the people I know who were renters over the years be kind of pushed out, which I understand is a reality of life to an extent, but I think it's happening out here at a much greater rate than it's happening, you know, in other parts of this community and in other parts of the country. And I think what we're seeing is manifesting right now, where it's slower than it's ever been out here this time of year. It's a struggle to find employment, people that can actually show up to work out here, and the people that we get don't necessarily stay because they're having trouble getting out here. I think there's a lot of income washing going on in the community in terms of we're just looking at specific groups of people all the time, and we're kind of missing a lot of the funky characters that make Folly what it is. And I think, you know, obviously it sounds like there's an income component to this in terms of people that are working out here, but I can also see it just as our tax base grows and we have more income. I think it makes sense to use some of that to try to keep this community a community. Because what we're seeing in a lot of these barrier towns is what we're seeing right now, which is empty streets, which I think is bad for business. It's also bad for community organization. It's bad because a lot of those people are the people that are volunteering at events, that are doing beach cleanups, that are looking out for neighbors, that are a call that can be made if something comes up. So I just wanted to address that general concept. Thank you for your time.
Do you have any recommendations?
I mean, I think, like I said, there could be two elements to this. There could be a And I understand that some of the police and services do get a stipend to be out here. I think there's an element where gainful employment could be a gateway to some kind of stipend, if that's what you guys are considering. I also think there should be some kind, a mixture where it's also a socioeconomic thing for residents who don't necessarily benefit us directly just financially.
Okay.
So that's kind of how I feel.
Okay,
Thank you.
thank you, Beth.
Yeah, yeah.
Any other?
Anyone else? Okay,
Okay, discussion on affordable housing. Do you wanna
let me kick
lead
this
the
off.
way, or?
So today I have this, in front of you, you have the survey results that I have emailed to you earlier. And I'm gonna go through and kind of summarize some of the things that I noticed, because I know I didn't have too much time to look at it. And the things that are important through here. But before we start, a couple things I wanted to talk about. One was, two people have brought up that we did not include long-term renters in the survey. The actual, we asked for surveys for people who were owned the long-term rental house, but not the people who were renting the long-term house.
And we talked about it, but somehow we missed it.
Yeah,
Well, you
Publishing
have
that survey.
employees,
we do have employees.
but
Yeah.
there's a lot of long-term renters that aren't employees.
Right,
They
so
might
this-
be contracted out, they might be independent, they might be
Right.
retired.
So this would be people who are not employed on Folly but do live here. That's the segment.
How would you capture those people?
The same way with the survey here, they like
That's,
this.
this is a topic for y'all to have a discussion about. So
It
that's
was
just
something that we kind of missed on the
Yeah.
survey question.
Yeah, no, I understand that. I'm just like, how, so yes, we clearly need to ask those people, but how do you capture those people? Is,
Well, how many of them are there?
we don't know.
The city doesn't know?
I'm wondering. We don't know
How many
Is there a tax?
Is there a what?
Is there a tax on long-term renters? Or-
We know the number of long-term rental licenses that there are, but what we don't know, there can be 30 days and up. So we're talking about how many people are permanent residents on the island that rent.
But there's a long-term rental license,
It is,
right?
but it's
But we're talking about
30
the
days
person
and
who
more.
rents the house itself.
Right.
Just
Not the
that
owner
person.
of the house, but the person who's renting. So I think the easiest way would be to go to the people who are renting out and ask them to ask their,
give
to
that
forward the
information.
information to their tenants.
right, right.
And they
Or
might
couldn't we
be
just
all of
publish
the
this-
above. They might have 5 gigs in order to live out here, you know, there might be.
And I guess my thought is that I think we discussed it and somehow or another we missed it in the, like, it was, in my understanding and what I was trying to communicate a couple months back was, I think there needs to be, do you work on the island, do you live on the island, or do you live on the island? One of the questions is, do you work on the island? Like, so we talked about having a long-term rental
variation.
survey, just like one of these, and I think we can publish that, but we missed it. We missed actually publishing and coming up with the questions specific to, like, how much you need your rent to be to afford to live here, to the people who already
Yeah.
live here, who
One
maybe don't
person
work on the island.
Answered that, but.
So let's get to that in a second. Before we start the discussion, about workforce housing is, we're gonna go over these survey results that we have, and then I gave y'all 3 recommendations that I think y'all have kind of come close to, wanting to pass, and the details maybe need to be hammered out a little bit more today, but I think you're very close to being there. And I don't wanna get bogged down in the survey results. We're gonna talk about this, and we're gonna add this as a survey result, as a survey option. But the planning commission's job is a 40,000-foot view to give broad recommendations and a framework. You're not here to do the market research, you're not here to do the environmental impact assessment. So the 3 options that were in that email today, if you agree, I think that you're very close to coming up with the details, to give those recommendations to council. The first 2 definitely, the third one about the ADUs, we'll talk about that more, because I want some more feedback from y'all, because I'm not as sure what you want for that one. And by next month, those should be solidified. I think you're there. So let's just keep that in mind. What's up?
Ben, who is a renter out here,
Mhm.
we could ask him,
Yeah, I was gonna say, I have one quick thing I could say if this helps at all. Does it come up?
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay, so I will say, there's a bit, we are an endangered species, the long-term renters, right? Part of keeping our apartments mostly has been keeping it on the down low and not talking about this. Liam and I are both renters, we've gotten a lot of flack. Luckily, we're both kind of work in situations where we're not dependent on community as much as we used to be. And I hear what you're saying about trying to find those people, but those people don't really wanna be found, and that's part of the issue. There's repercussions for those actions. We had repercussions for speaking out on long-term, short-term rental, and so I think you're gonna have a really hard time, as I think you guys have seen, getting people to come in and talk. Because I assume most of you are owners. I'm on a month-to-month lease. Like, if I piss off my landlords, I'm out. And so I think that's something that's important to just recognize here, is that it's gonna be hard to get a lot of engagement from the people you're talking about until you're proposing something that they can apply for, I think, just heads up on
The
that.
survey is anonymous.
I was gonna ask, do you think?
No, there's a level of trust, and I'm not saying it's
Okay,
on you
I
guys,
understand.
and also just disconnection at this point, I think people are
Okay.
exhausted. So just so, to help clarify a little bit.
I was gonna ask that, do you think if it was posted the same way it was, if you click on that link, because it's no way to, it's anonymous, there's no way to track who the email, it was not
Well,
even
I
an
think part
email.
of it is your demographic is either people, it seems like a lot's Facebook centric, because that's what the city uses. You're either dealing with young people who don't use Facebook, or probably older people who don't use Facebook, who are technologically literate. So I think that's part of the issue. You're not really getting that middle range of renters, because those aren't people that really exist out here anymore. It's either.
How much has your, what have you seen in terms of rent in the past 10 years? How much has it skyrocketed?
Well, I'll
per
put it
square
this way,
foot?
mine went up 40% in 1 year. It's not even so much about rent prices going up, it's that they're non-existent. There aren't,
Yeah.
I mean, and I know, I don't wanna get back to that issue, we fought that battle. I know that there's improvements being made, but it's not even a matter of how much, it's
Inventory.
if they
They're just not there.
exist, and understandably, a lot of people, those places never even make it onto the market, or any kind of, like, Liam and I have both been out here so many years and worked in food and beverage that we're lucky enough to interact with a lot of y'all, so that's kind of how we got our spots, but an average person looking to move out here, or to move from an apartment to a new one, which is what I'm struggling with, it's not a thing.
Okay.
So hopefully that helps a little bit.
Yeah, well, Ben, so how, and I know this is probably a lot to think about, but
Good to
how
see
would,
you.
do you have any thoughts or ideas of how to reach those renters? Like what makes them, what would be a comfortable way to do it? What would
Well,
like,
what's the purpose of reaching them, just so I'm clear?
well, to see what they're, if, to fill out a survey and hear, what are they,
Yeah.
like what you just told us
Yeah.
is very helpful.
I mean, I
Like,
think
what, for
you're not
example,
going
would you be willing to be within 5 miles of Folly, or would you just move way out to Somerville? Like,
I'll
so that's-
probably personally leave South Carolina when I lose my place out here.
Right,
That's
so,
part of
so
what-
I think
it's
she's
not
saying-
attractive to be across the bridge, or in James Island is not considered close enough to work here and enjoy Folly.
I think it depends a bit if you're talking about sustaining people that already have rentals out here, if you're talking about attracting new people. And I think there should be a mix. I think part of this should be to help elderly or poorer folks work with their landlords to make sure the landlords can afford the increase in
Yeah.
costs and can make money. That's important.
And
We're not
actually,
trying to,
And not, because I don't want you to be like in the firing squad, because you're
No,
willing to
you're
get up
good.
and.
I've been on it
but-
before, I'm not worried.
Well, I think the point was, this is why we want to be able to reach some other people to get more input as anonymously as possible, just to get someone comfortable enough to share with us, so we know if we as a commission are proposing, it really needs to be on the island, or does it
Yeah.
matter, or if it's just over the bridge on James Island, does that help? So trying to get a
hear you.
collective
Yeah.
opinion or input, so whether it's a survey or,
Yeah.
that's what we're trying
No,
to
I hear
figure.
you. I know you guys aren't getting a lot of response. It makes it hard.
I think he's told us a lot.
Yeah.
I mean, I think
we
you're
know.
not gonna get it,
Absolutely.
is what I'm saying.
Yeah.
As soon as, if there's something that you guys move on to committee, then city council approves and it's a thing, you're gonna get a lot of people applying, word of mouth will spread quickly, but
Yeah.
I think
Yeah.
you're gonna have a hard time, especially
Reaching them.
people entrenched like we are. Liam and I, I'm speaking for my friend Liam, because we're in the same situation. We've already taken the hits, we're not worried about, the reputation stuff, dealing with people that are, our businesses and our livelihoods have already been affected by this. So I think a lot of people have seen that and they're not willing to, even if it's not a direct thing, speak out anymore.
And Ben, knowing you, I know you're speaking on behalf of a huge group of
And we have a
people,
group.
so
We do a
thank you
lot of-
for,
Yeah. a
thank
lot of
you for
work, so.
coming to share with us.
If there were to be, one more question, if there
Yeah,
were
you're
to be, let's just say in an ideal world, we had unlimited funds and we were just cutting checks, would it go to, in your mind, as a tenant, would it be better to provide that stipend directly to a tenant or to the landlord?
I think the landlord, would make more sense. So the issue is we have a lot of landlords that are upset that they bought properties thinking that they could short-term rent them,
Right.
and they can't. And so if you can offset that, they're not gonna, I mean, they're
No,
not
I
gonna get
agree. I
what they
just
want, but
wanted
they're
to
gonna get
hear
enough.
That's one of the programs we're gonna talk
And
about
I,
tonight.
that's, to me,
'Cause I
if you
think-
can entice landlords to offer those properties, that's the route I would, it's a section 8 kind of situation in a
Yeah.
way. But, rather than it going to the person, go directly to the landlord.
It's really great to hear from you.
I
I thank you for
Thank
coming.
you, guys.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
I think Ben
Absolutely.
too, like whatever y'all hear tonight, I mean,
Yeah.
I know you all are a big source of
You have some people
of
talking.
sharing
Yeah.
that information, please do. And if any
Yeah.
of them feel like they wanna just call Jenna or, you know, and say, hey, these are my thoughts
Yeah.
on long-term rentals, you know, I mean, just call or email or
They
something.
can also
to-
email her and tell her they want to remain anonymous.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
No, I'll
she'll send
spread
it
the
out
word.
without.
Yeah.
It's not easy, I
contacting.
mean, obviously, we're talking about a demographic that
Yeah.
doesn't necessarily speak up, so.
That's okay.
But anyways, thank you guys.
Thank you, Ben.
Yeah.
So Jenna, we're still talking about what we're going to talk about, right?
What's the question?
What we're gonna talk about tonight.
Well, so let's go over the 3 recommendations that I had and flesh that out a little bit. Then I will discuss lease to locals, the details that I have found, then we'll do the survey.
Okay.
So the first one was the public safety stipend, expanding that. I think I've heard that, I think most of you all agree that we would like to expand
Yes.
that. So the ways to do that, the opportunities for increasing are, number one, the price, the cost per person that's allowed. It's $600 right now if you live on Folly, it's $300 if you live on James Island. So it would be increasing that amount. Number 2 would be increasing what the city pays per month, which is $3,600, because it's $600 stipends. So increasing that amount per month. And then number 3 would be expanding the eligibility. It's just public safety right now. If you wanted to open it up to people who work in City Hall, and you can also add a salary cap to that. A lot of places do. We talked at the first meeting about the median income, AMI. That's $80,000, $400 in Folly. You could do it at 100% of that or 120% of that, which is $96,000. So those are the details that you could flesh out on how to expand that.
Tell me the difference between 1 and 2. If you increase cost per person, isn't that increasing the city? How
Budget.
much the city pays per month?
No, it just
No, not
means less
necessarily.
people can apply.
Oh,
and
yeah,
receive
so if you
benefits.
increase
So we
the
really need to
6
do both.
Yeah, if you do
Yeah.
number 1, you gotta do number 2.
It seems like 1 is 2.
Uh-huh.
But
And
isn't the total
well, I
pie
think-
only $42,000 max?
Right now,
Yeah,
yes.
Do we know
So
the
that would be the
breakdown?
number 2. Do you want to increase that total max?
so once that's gone, when you're applying, it's gone.
Okay,
First
but
come, first serve.
Is there a breakdown of how many currently are on Folly that we pay out per month?
I don't think there's anybody on Folly right now. There used to be 1, or 1 to 2. There's never been more than 1.
Because it used to be that it was, the spirit of the whole stipend was to encourage the first responders to come back to calls.
Mhm.
So why would we want to expand that to city employees other than, I mean, it seems like that we don't need to encourage them to come back to work. I mean,
Right, it wouldn't be a direct, the public safety one is tied to their ability to be able to come back, because it's not just Folly, it's also James Island, so that have them on call. This is the broader picture of having more affordable housing for people who are making the economy work in these areas.
was any of those questions in the surveys specifically
not about
asking
this.
about how much of a stipend it would take for
There was a
them
question
to
that said,
come
how what
back?
would it take for you to live in Folly, yeah. And again, that's the market research details that we don't necessarily have.
Because you had these funds, but not everybody used them, right? Because they
No,
were
they were
farther
used.
out.
They were used,
They
right?
were used.
I
They're
thought you said
used,
only
James,
2.
2 people Folly, the rest James Islands were all used.
Right.
And do they have to be James up, like they have to be within a radius?
For the public safety one, it's $600 if you live on Folly, $300 if you live on the geographic area of James Island.
Okay, and does that, we don't have anything that includes public works,
Mm.
right?
But you have a total of 49 people working for the city, or is it 79?
It's in the 70s.
70?
It's
Including
79, sounds right.
everyone?
79. That includes
Firefighters.
public works?
Public Works, Public Safety, and Administration. Public Works did have this, and it's been budgeted to allow Public Works to have a stipend.
Okay.
Nobody has ever used the Public Works one, I think, because it's just not enough to make a difference.
Is it the same, 600?
I
What is
think
it?
so. And that's been around
So,
for
but
years,
that
but they
does-
finally stopped, nobody used it.
So is that money still earmarked for that, it's just not getting used?
The public
Is it-
works, they finally stopped this year.
Okay,
because
so it's
they've
not even
used
the
it for
budget.
years.
Okay.
So that's the first suggestion. Number two is the lease to locals that I mentioned. This is what Councilmember Bazell came and brought to our attention. We talked a little bit about it last month. I've spoken to those people, and it looks really promising and helpful, that program. It is a one-time payment that the city would make to homeowners. And the lease to locals program runs everything. They do the market research first to determine how much what the capacity is for how many houses they would recommend to do this for, who the homeowners would be. Everything's customizable by the city. We choose the parameters of, say, what the market, who's allowed to do it. Do they have to live in the city of Folly Beach? That would be something that the city would be able to make those decisions, and then lease to locals administers it. A one-time payment to a homeowner to convert from a short-term rental to a long-term rental, or from an empty home, a second vacation home that hasn't been rented at all, to a long-term rental.
Jenna, real quick on that, if someone has a downstairs area that they just don't rent out now, and it's owner occupied for the rest of the house, does that apply there? If they're like, I have an area, I'd like to rent it out now.
These are all of the customizable questions that would
So-
come
And
up.
what does it cost the city to use this platform?
So the city would pay the stipend, obviously, to the homeowner, and then the cost to lease to locals is $3,750 a month, which is, I think it's about $45,000 a year. So that's
Wait,
for
hold on. Okay.
for
one more
them to
time.
administer the entire project. That means coming in at the beginning and doing the market research, doing all the consulting, looking at these things like how much do you make right now, how much would it take you to stay, how much would you need to stay on the island, those kinds of things. They would determine the eligibility, that the house is actually in the city, that the person, the tenant, is a worker in the city. They would look at the lease and make sure it matches all these
Okay.
criteria. Then they would continue with compliance.
But
for the entire-
375 for
Per month.
1 month, per
No.
month.
Per month.
That is $37.50 to lease to locals for 1 month, for them to do this entire compliance, and that, for a
So
year,
one
that's about
time.
$45,000.
It's per month.
No, not per home.
Per month.
But
No,
just
just
so,
total, just
hold
total.
on, just so we're
That's
all
the
on the
cost
same
total.
page, if we were to make this recommendation to
So
council,
50 grand is it?
hold on. We're gonna make this recommendation to council, we'd be recommending that they participate in the program. We would not talk about any of the details unless they task it back to us.
Right.
So cost, all that is important for us to know, but we would only be recommending to council that we think Folly should participate in this program.
We're
And
just
then-
presenting it.
It's
Right.
so important
Well,
for us to know
I was
it,
gonna
because
say-
I wouldn't wanna recommend it if it cost 50 grand per month, but if
Right.
it just costs 50 grand
50
per
grand
year,
per year.
Well,
you know.
trust me,
what we
they're gonna
think-
send it back to us.
They
went out.
recommended that they think based on our cap and based on our housing availability, they would start with
I'm
10
actually surprised it's not
10
more.
units total for the first year, and that, the cost for 10 units would be about $50,000 a year.
I'm
For them
shocked.
to administer it from start to finish entirely.
That was my first question, is it is based on the actual inventory that we're starting with, and that means if we got to 20 next year, the cost would go up. Again, I know that's on council,
Yeah.
but for me, I wanna, before I make a recommendation, I wanna understand, if all of a sudden we're recommending
That, the
$500,000
$37.50 is
to one
based on
company.
10, and that was her recommendation on based what I told her, what we're dealing with right now in Folly. She said she would recommend 10, and that would be the cost per year, 50,000.
And we definitely wanna know the details, but, individual scenario details, we can't hash that out.
Yeah, we don't,
No.
it's just a general understanding.
So, right, the recommendation is for the city to participate in the lease to locals
Right.
program.
Where else is this program being used? What
A
other?
lot out west, and it's resort towns, because it's all about places that don't have the space to build.
It's like Colorado,
Yeah.
it's Denver,
It's
you can
right.
go at least
So,
locals
and
and it shows up.
how,
There's about 12 markets, and I can't tell you
There's
the names of them right
Nantucket was
now.
one,
Chris,
Salt
you
Lake
could-
City,
Yeah.
or,
I think it was Jackson Hole and
he's looking it up.
Breckenridge.
and
and
how,
Sedona.
and I think too is, you know, how long have they been doing this? Cause this is clearly kind of a niche thing, you know, it's needed, so it's a great business idea. But, you know, so this is one, but are there others?
Yeah,
You
can I
know,
speak to
in
that?
addition to lease to locals, like, and I haven't had a chance to do any
Of course.
dive deep into lease to locals, but if you know things.
I do know some stuff.
Yeah, great, great.
Come on up.
So, Chris Pizzell, 310 East Hudson. I've actually spoken to these people like maybe 5, 6, 7 times over the last year. When we started talking about this at our strategic planning last year, I was like, it's good to have a concept, but it's also better to have a real idea and a platform and a framework. So I did a lot of research and I found these, placemate.com is the website where you can find out about this. But they started out with a program in Truckee, California. Let me see if I got the date on that one. I think they started there. Okay, so since they started there, they've opened up 206 housing units on the community, and they've housed 500 people. And I think they've done that over the course of about 5 years. But since they started there, they expanded into Mammoth Lakes, Nantucket, Woodstock, Vermont, Eagle County, Colorado, Placer County, California. They're in Provincetown, Massachusetts now, Wood Valley, Idaho, and South Lake Tahoe, California. The common denominator between all those communities is they're all resort towns. They're all having trouble with people being, basically the same scenario we're talking about here. The supply is shrunk. People are getting forced off of the community. And it does impact the community. There's statistics behind that. So they're stepping in to kind of provide this framework. It's very open-ended. I think Jenna alluded to that. So whatever we decide are the criteria, that's the criteria for Folly. It's not like they come in and dictate something. So, you know, I think this is a great solution. It's up to you guys to make that decision. But I think back to what Bennett was saying earlier, it's the issue really is not the renters, it's the supply. And I think when you get your head around that, then this kind of addresses that issue. Because if you don't have supply, where are people gonna go? So all this by incentivizing people that are currently not renting long-term and getting that supply number up. If we could do 10 people on the island this year, I told Skip earlier, I call that a huge win. I
That
mean,
is a huge one.
Yeah.
so, if
It's
you
still
have
not a
questions.
cheap date, though.
Sure,
It's still not a cheap
not a
date.
cheap date,
I
but,
mean, if you just take a look at the one you just mentioned, Vermont, Woodstock,
yes,
I mean, long-term incentive per qualified tenant, $6,000, and then you got a yearly after that of $3,000, and that is for a one-bedroom.
yeah. But again, you look at the economic impact of empty houses, you look at the people that are not living here year-round.
Location.
There's a lot
Turnover
of
rate.
costs.
Yeah.
And we've talked about the police turnover, $60,000 a time we lose a policeman, we have to replace him.
Oh,
So I mean, a lot of this stuff we're paying for long-term renting costs are hitting the city, we just don't realize it yet. So,
So you have the cost to have them come in, make their suggestions, but then there's also an annual cost to keep it going after that, most likely.
Sounds like
Yeah,
there's a
that's that
one-time
part of
fee
that-
to come
that
It's a
in.
monthly
one-time
fee.
fee, but then plus
And then the
$3,000 annually
A
or
month, yeah,
whatever,
yeah.
that, or a month, right?
Yeah.
Okay,
And
okay. What other, I know you've gone really into this, are there other companies similar to this that do something?
I've looked around, I haven't seen anything that was this
It's-
like turnkey.
And has that
Yeah.
many, like,
And
other
this has a
towns?
pretty good track record.
Right,
so.
right, okay.
And Jenna had mentioned to me today that 75% of the people that join the program keep renewing, like, stay in it.
Great to
year
have
over year.
somebody.
What do they
Yeah,
consider
so
long-term,
let me
30
re-
days?
No, we got.
Let me repeat that one thing. This is a one-time payment, and at the end of they break it out into two phases. You get it at the beginning and the end of the lease, but the cost is for 1 year. At the end of the year, they have a 75% rate of people who continue to rent long-term.
Wow.
So,
Yeah.
without any further payments.
Yeah.
So, that, again, it's all about supply. So, I think if we're looking at it from a bigger picture, that's the number we need to increase that.
It's almost like they're just trying to show landlords the way. Like,
Yeah.
this is how it,
Or there's another alternative, yeah.
yeah, right, but they're doing kind of all the work for them, like, here's all the math,
Yeah.
and here's,
Chris,
And
do
it
they
cuts out
also
some
just
of the
assure
grid.
that,
yeah, yeah.
It cuts out some of the greed, because they're saying this, and this will work.
Yeah,
I
And,
think, so they made
you
the
know, you
parameter.
think you can
They're the
get
experts.
way up here, but this is the real world. This is what works.
Yeah, you're not gonna get rich on this program if you're a
No.
homeowner, but you are
So, yeah.
getting utility out of your home and so forth.
And maybe this is more like a council to customize with the platform or the group, but just, I guess I have concern to make sure you're getting a benefit, but assuring it's passing down to make an affordable monthly rent
Yes,
is the
you
key.
lit-
Yeah.
the rents are limited.
Okay, so
There's a cap
on them.
You could only, the rent per bedroom is X per month, you can't go over that.
And they'll
To
help
me,
do
it's
the
a
research
win-win.
up
And
front
they
to
will
say what we
figure
think that
what-
cap should be.
yes.
Perfect.
Yeah, they will do the details of this.
And if 75% of the owners are signing up for the next year,
Seems to be
then
working.
something's going right there.
I appreciate you looking into it, cause when I go into lease to locals, it's almost like you have to sign up in order to get your questions answered. So I was trying to sign up as a homeowner just to get my questions answered, and I don't know who you talk to and how you're able to talk to them.
I've spent a
but-
lot of time with them, so yeah.
Thank you.
Well, I have a profile started, but I haven't gotten any of my questions answered, so thanks.
Yeah, so, but you're right, it's not cheap, but I think it is a
Well,
solid.
I mean,
solution, yeah.
in Vermont, it's a 3-bedroom, the max you can charge for rent is $2,800 a month, max. I don't know what you guys are paying, but $2,800. The city's gotta cough up an initial long-term of $6,000. And then seasonally, every year, another $3,000 from that point on.
But again, those
I
are
think that's
parameters that we can set.
Well, I know, I'm
I feel
just
like
saying,
really
it's,
inexpensive.
Yeah,
you know,
but again, I
you
don't know.
got
what that-
79 people, if 40 of them jump on,
But it
I mean,
also
you're definitely
prevents
gonna-
this
you're
from
gonna have
turning
a tax
into
hike.
a boring old Seabrook item.
Yeah, and they
Right.
have many
It's no
avenues
offense to
to
Seabrook.
help fund that,
Yeah.
grants and other
So we can.
land trust type things, so.
Should we say forever?
Tonight, I hope that we'll just get a framework and then we can talk specifics down the road. Because there are, like you said, there's other avenues to fund these things. But if we could just get something in place that the conversation is moving forward, I think we're way ahead.
And
So,
to Paula's point, it's not our job to figure out the finances and how to fund it at the end of the day, but having a good understanding of what it costs before we recommend it. But then
Yeah.
that's up to you guys to decide, hey, we have it, we'll find it in the budget.
yeah.
To me, it sounds like a win-win.
Me too.
Me too.
Or at least a
And I think
tool
this has been
for a
very
try it,
helpful
see
To make
how it
us
works after 1
understand.
to 2 years, and if it's not successful for Folly, it's not successful.
And we're not committed, right? Buy into the program
Just for
for
1
a year and
But
then
I-
say it's not
I
working.
do think it's something, if you say this happens, I think you do kind of have to commit for a couple of years.
Yeah, I
to-
agree.
You know, to give it a chance.
Their
right?
suggestion
And-
was the first year is all they're gonna ask for the contract to be, but that the city has in mind that it will be at least a multi-year.
Yeah, I mean,
project.
'cause otherwise.
Can we
yeah,
use
you gotta-
It's just
the,
minute address.
ATAX for a couple of years to do this?
This is up to council
Since-
though, right?
Like,
Yeah.
could we technically, since it's not going toward, it's still going towards affordable housing, even though it's going to a different platform? It's not,
Can we use ATEC? Yes, yeah, we
okay,
think so.
all right. Well,
But
that's gonna be a
that'll be a discussion
budgetary
for them. Yeah.
conversation.
That's a budget, right?
That'll be
Yeah,
discussion
let's leave that
for
to
them.
those guys.
We don't do much.
Thank you, Chris.
Thank you.
Don't go
Thank you.
too far.
I would say that we have probably discussed that well enough that we all have a good understanding. Would
Yeah,
you
does anyone have
feel
any-
comfortable?
I feel like I
voting on
have
it?
2% understanding of what I need to understand about this, but I would like to know more.
But remember, you don't have to understand exactly the ins and outs of every single
I know, that would be great though.
Offline, sister, offline.
You have to know
It's a
if you think
recommendation.
this is a good project that the city should undertake. That
Well,
this is
we
something-
And
Yeah.
if they do this, it's not the only thing, that we can recommend multiple avenues. It wouldn't say, try this, and that's it.
It's not in
Right.
stone.
Yeah.
So that's,
Right.
this is one option,
This-
the second is the other. The third is the ADUs, and we're gonna get to that a little bit more. There were kind of two.
Could the city develop its own lease to local platform to avoid the fees?
Yes, but I think for $45,000 for them to do this from start to finish is
You could
way,
learn
way cheaper
The
than the city's
business
ever gonna
plan
be able
and
to
then
get
make
to
your
it.
own lease to local Folly style.
Yeah, but
They
they,
have to
they're
do-
like the expert, like.
They're experts
they're
already.
experts.
We'd have to hire new people. It would cost
Yeah.
an extravagant amount of money.
You
if
must
we
have
wanted
a
this to
lane
happen.
for them there.
10 years down the road, maybe,
Right.
like, you
You're
know,
not
I
too
think.
much on the
But it
money.
eliminates
I
the
do
conflict
hang
of
up on the
interest.
money every single
Well,
time.
Yeah.
I think to keep moving forward.
This is just to,
Right.
Right.
City probably that one,
Recommendation.
yeah.
I do get hung
Yeah.
up on money.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's go to the survey now and go over the
Sorry.
results of the survey, and then let y'all move on to the ADU discussion, and then I think we're doing
Good.
well.
Yeah,
Okay?
okay.
Jenna,
All right.
before you get started on the survey, there's a bunch of different ones, but the most I see is 61. Do you have a total number of participants? I mean, I know that maybe somebody happened at 2 different ones, which is doubtful, but do you have a general idea of how many?
It was right, close to 100.
I thought so, okay.
I think we've gotten great feedback. Close to 100 people
Based
have
on what we have
responded.
here, it's 99.
Oh, is it?
Together, if we
Yeah.
add
Yeah.
the papers together.
Okay, that's what
Yeah.
I was doing too. I came close to 100, okay.
Okay.
It's
So
good,
the,
it's pretty awesome from 13.
I think this is awesome. So the first one you have in front of you is, and at the top here, it is who answered the survey. So full-time property owners should be the first one in your packet. So this one I thought was, let's look at page 3. 70% thought that the city should explore solutions to affordable housing. I think that's kind of that's a good indicator that this is something that people want to look at. And if you look at page 4, the two winners for how the city should do this are monetary incentives to property owners and zoning changes. So the exact things that y'all are looking at right now.
Remind me what the third one behind that was, the city participating in regional ... What was it, regional?
That was for the
programs?
Yeah, the county, and that's what we talked about last week, that that's not really an option, or last month, that the county had that new program.
But you have to apply
You
for
have
it.
to
But you have to
apply
apply for it, and it was the,
And we don't have
ARPA
any
funds, and
thing
this,
to show that we've
we
done
wouldn't
it
be able
before.
to, we wouldn't be able to designate where, we could donate money to it, but we wouldn't be able to say that these.
Got it.
Could we
have to
use
benefit
something
all.
like lease to locals after 2 years and use that as a way to show that we've created affordable housing and then apply later for something like this?
Probably not, I don't think that doesn't qualify as creating, developing the housing. You have to develop, you have to be a developer.
Ah, okay.
basically. For that, for the particular one we talked about last month.
Also, Jenna, so the property tax rebates, we can't do that either, can we? Okay, so those are kind of off the table, okay.
On page 5, the question was, if the city allowed ADUs, would you build it on your property? And it's a pretty overwhelming no. The number 4 person said yes, they could do it under their house. Well, they can't. FEMA doesn't allow ground floor properties, so there were only maybe,
But we knew
About
that was
Just
gonna
like they
be
won't
the
let
case
me, just like they
because,
won't let me do my garage.
but we knew that the ADU was only gonna be throwing a dart at certain properties. So
Right.
that's why we're getting so many no's. Because we
Well,
have to have the land survey. We'd have to make sure, they'd have to know. They'd have to get their own land survey.
I
this
think-
is just to give an example, these are people who'd be willing. What
That's
kind of full-time owners are willing to do an ADU? And this
Yeah,
is
that's awesome.
saying out of about 50, only 7 said they would. That's the point to take from
Well,
here.
7's a good number.
So,
7.
like, I got a chance to, and this is the only one that I had a chance to look at, but I was a little confused where, because, yes, I think the city of Folly Beach should explore solutions to affordable, attainable housing. That 70%. And then when you kind of try to, and, zoning changes, that was popular, as well as the monetary incentives. But then when you got to the responses, they're all no's.
Well, that was on ADU
Yeah,
specifically.
Yes,
So-
specifically
That was on
asking,
ADUs.
would you build an ADU at
It
your?
was
Yeah,
for
so-
your
Right,
specific,
so then what other zoning changes do you think people had in mind?
they're saying that they would let, if somebody else wanted to do an ADU, they just would themselves. That's what this means.
And Jenna, in all fairness, I think when you really get into it, most of them were saying, no, it
They
doesn't
don't-
work for my property,
don't
or no,
think they
I want
could.
privacy. So I do think it's two very different things, is I'm okay with the city exploring ADUs.
Right.
My property's not right for it, or it's not right for our lifestyle or whatnot, so it's,
Well, a lot of
We're
people
still
were
just-
worried about the environment too, and
Yes.
that means everybody,
Yeah,
too,
I agree.
so, okay. I was
But a
just
lot
a
of
little bit
people
like,
said, too,
I see the positive, but then when you read the responses, I was like, well, wait, all these people are like, no. Okay.
Let's see.
Very
And then some of the
surprising.
yeses were yes, but, yeah, so they weren't even hard yeses, they were maybes.
Maybe,
A lot
right.
of maybes are
And
exploring it, so I think
some of
people
the
are
yeses
open,
being, and can my family use this house instead?
which that's not a yes,
which
right,
is-
that's not,
Right.
right. But yeah, their parents are mentioned here, children are mentioned here, that's not what would, because these would be, deed restricted to long-term rentals, to affordable house, to workforce
in
housing.
all fairness, one of those questions was, yes, if it was okay, I could rent to my children. So if
Mhm. If they
you're gonna charge your
qualify.
college-age kids to live there, then
If they
what's the
qualify,
difference?
yeah, yeah.
Who's gonna rent to their children?
Not really.
Just
them out the
another
door.
item.
Page 7
money.
is,
That was
taxes.
the biggest surprise to me.
What, 7?
Page 7,
who should be the
who should
target
benefit?
recipient?
And the lowest response is current residents. Like people that already live here that are being pushed out is how, I'm like, how
I
is that the lowest?
But I think that might come back to the lack of participation with certain groups to it
Yeah.
as well. And that's part of why I think it's important that we have a survey specific for long-term renters who live on the island now, because I had multiple people say, I don't know what survey to do. I don't work because I'm retired. I've been renting for
Yeah.
35 years. I'm 86 years old, but I don't know, I don't have a survey to do.
And there's been an attitude of, I don't wanna subsidize my neighbor's house, they should pay for their own house. And I don't think they're taking into account that we're not talking about doing this for everybody, that we're doing it for elderly people, or wanting to do it for elderly people, or people who have lived here long term already and are being forced out.
Right.
So, I mean, we can't capture that in the.
Well, they've been, the current residents are the ones that have been loyal and have built this community, and I think 38% is pretty
Yeah,
solid.
I really do think if we'd had that missing survey, that we would have a different
yeah.
percentage
do
here
too.
completely.
But this again is just
This is
people
just
that
for
are primary
full-time
residents.
property owners, and
Or
you'll see that the
full-time.
biggest answer was they think it should be for first responders, and you'll
Yeah.
see that as a theme for every single, that the first responders win every time. So
Yeah.
that's something, that's the big thing to take away from here, because if you do the least to locals, you're not necessarily saying it's only for people who work in a certain industry. It's just, it's, salary based. So the other thing in page 7 and 8 was who else should be the target, and I know I mentioned teachers last time, that was number 17 that had already answered. There's a couple more in here: medical, education, and service, social service staff, volunteers on the island, such as Turtle Team. But then there's a lot of people who say just set parameters based on financial need, and that's what Lease to Locals does. Page 9 is where should the housing be within James Island. Folly Beach is what one, and that's, I say one, this isn't a contest, but that if you'll, that's the theme through all of the surveys too, you'll see people say Folly Beach and James Island. In the comments for that one, there's a lot of talk about free market, and I think we've discussed that, and you all understand what's going on here. This is, yes, the free market has caused the problem here, and that's what we're trying to kind of counter and address. And it's for workforce, is to keep this economy going, so that the people who do work for the city of Folly Beach or for the food and beverage industry or anything that's making the economy of Folly Beach work, those people can afford to live closer to here instead of an hour away.
And a lot of, look at what other cities are doing.
Yeah, and other cities, every city is struggling with this.
Yeah,
There are-
Seattle just went up to $20 an hour minimum wage, but that doesn't necessarily help small businesses thrive. I mean, there's always a opportunity cost to making these shifts.
And you'll see there are several, yes, people are saying, I don't want my property tax to go towards helping other people live. So that, those are sprinkled in here too in these comments. One thing I'll point out, number 11, limited free parking impact workers on Folly. That came up 3 or 4 times about people who work here and have to pay to park. That is something that the city could address, so that's something for y'all to think about too. Having some sort of a sticker of reduced parking rate for people who work here.
That's something we could fold into the
That could be a
recommendations
recommendation,
on this discussion.
I think that's a definite.
Because even if someone lives, 1 mile on James Island, you're most likely gonna need to drive to work. Especially if you're an F&B and you get off at 2:00 in the morning, you're not riding your bike home down Folly Road, so providing some parking for.
So that came up at least 3 times, there are 3 times people
Yeah.
recommended the parking. Okay, so that's full-time property owners. The next one you have should be employees who work in the city of Folly Beach. And the big thing on page 1 I will point out is that most of these people all
Been here a
but
while.
one have worked here longer than a year.
Yep.
So these are long-term people, these are not someone who's just been here for a month.
Give me extra copy of
Yeah,
this.
but you're talking about 18 people.
I know.
Right.
There's a number of
Right.
businesses that have more than 18 people in
And
one
that's,
business.
right, and that's why from the beginning we said, these are not statistically relevant, this is just a way to facilitate feedback. But I did wanna point that out as something that jumped out, I think,
Right.
for
Kind of
that, this group.
But these aren't just people that work for the city. For
No.
the city.
No, they work on
Okay.
Folly Beach
Yeah.
in some business or.
Most of them are people who work not for the city.
Okay.
Because I know which ones in here are the city workers.
Yeah.
So, that's,
Can read into it
these are
there.
anonymous, other than the people that I told to do it who work for the city. I know which one those are, but other than that, these are truly anonymous. I don't have any idea who the other ones are. Page 3, you'll see the times that people are commuting, 30 minutes, 1 hour. They talk about the seasons, obviously it's different on the season. Number 11, they say it could be 2 hours for them to get here,
Wow.
depending on the season. Page 4 is the monthly household income. This would be the market research that Leads to Locals could do, but you'll see that in general, it looks to be the $3,000 to $4,000 range is the income. Number 1 says 25K.
They just put their annual there.
They meant 2,500. I know who that is. 'Cause
They work for the city apparently.
Yes, I told him to do that one, and he doesn't know what K means. Page 5, this one is also an example of what the market research is. These numbers, we would have to go back and match what your monthly rent is to what you're taking into, to what you live in. All of those, that's how these are gonna be relevant to us.
Jenna,
So
on
they're
that-
not at this,
On that one, is there something, and again, anonymously, I don't care what property it is, but is there something that when the business license is issued, doesn't Stacy's team actually find out what the long-term rental monthly fee is? They don't collect
Only on
that?
short-term rental?
It would be really helpful if they were able to collect that so that we have an actual documented record of it going forward.
I did a search before a meeting today for apartments for rent on James Island, not on Folly. The lowest one bedroom I could find was 1,300.
That's actually cheaper than I
So
thought.
that's
1 to
kind of
2K sounds, looks like.
The
1 to
lowest
2K.
floor, but if, based on what they're paid, it's not
This would be
supposed to be
good
more than like
information for that
30%,
least
right? of
thirty,
their
Yeah,
income?
30%
It is
is
more.
what costs
Still.
the housing burden.
And that's a one bedroom, so if you have a family or anything, you know.
So at the end of the day, I probably will go home, just my data self, and add all this up, divide it, and figure out what the average is on what the average amount is on income and on paying out
About
months.
1 to 2.
The 6th page, would you be interested in moving closer to Folly? There's some emphatic yeses, a lot of yeses. The number 2 is the only no, and they just said they couldn't afford to.
I was gonna say, there's-
I think
I
that
think
might,
that's a yes.
that's maybe a yes if they could afford to, that's the point here.
Actually, some of the other feedback, I noticed that too, it was like, it's never gonna happen, so, you know, I think the answer was probably a yes, but no, never gonna happen on a couple of different surveys.
Page 7, other thoughts, and while this was the question about what would it take you to live on Folly, and some people did give, number 15 gave an amount, number 16 did also. But to your point, Kristen, earlier about the people that are long-term rentals currently, number 3, I worry constantly that I'll have to move from my long-term rented home, and so
Hear that
that
all
is
the
something that people,
Think about the emotional stress, not just so much the financial stress, but that just seems so threatening.
Yeah.
I don't know if this is the right time for commentary on this, but I guess something that maybe I said a couple of months ago, but it's important for me, like it's public safety, our firefighters, our city staff, all that's really important. But I can tell you, yoga instructors, retirees, turtle team, teachers, business owners, the film workers, flight attendants, these people have been here 15, 20, 25, one of them 30-something years renting this whole time, and it is part of our community. And so I guess I just want to humanize it a little bit, that, you know, it's not just about who works on the island to me. It's
Especially
about
people that have 5
protecting,
different things going on just to make their rent. It's just,
it's protecting the community. And there's a lot of amazing landlords who have chosen to keep renting their properties, you know, and So I guess I also wanna figure out how we consider that too, as we look at ideas, like, not just incentivizing new ones, but how do we make sure that we're being fair to the ones who continued all these years to continue to do that, offer a house?
Well, they would, if people's landlords switched to lease to locals, they could
Right.
apply for any of those.
Right, that's kinda what I'm thinking, is
Yeah.
making sure we're communicating that well, if it happens.
I think part of that discussion is gonna be when we, if we decide anything under the additional zoning stuff, why not additional zoning stuff? Never mind, I lost my train of thought. Cause we won't,
Over your head.
if we, increase the stipend, if we do recommend lease to locals and whatever was zoning, we still wouldn't be talking about who it applies to, would we?
No, probably not. It would be based on income.
Yeah,
Yeah, so everybody is welcome.
yeah,
to apply for this.
okay, well, that's good.
But what if you broke out, like, you know, first responders and all that? You said, all right, we definitely want to do A, you know, because we want to, you know, give them increase the stipend or the monthly or whatever, and that's its own bucket. And then you do lease to locals and let that be for
Everybody else.
everybody else.
I
Like,
agree.
I don't think you lump them in, because you've got, it's two totally different things that they bring to the beach, you know? And I don't know if it's fair you know, I think the city, as, you know, you've got employees, you know, public safety, and I think you start there. And then if it works and it takes, you know, and people love it, and you're like, all right, well, now let's trickle down to administrative or something. But I think, you know, the public safety, they're the ones that can be on the scene first and help, you know? So that, to me, that's its own thing. And then, but in addition to, not next, you do the lease to locals, so that you're also helping another group of people at the same time.
And there's no
Because
double
it's two
dipping.
different things.
Right,
Yeah.
the employee stipend is for people who work for the city.
Correct.
And the lease to locals is based on salary, open to people who.
Right, but I
work in
think
But
office.
no
if you
double
offer-
dipping though,
I'm sorry, you
right?
said based on salary?
Well, the recommendation would.
Lease to locals?
Yes. Right, the tenants
I'll have to
would,
reread that again, because I didn't see that part.
right, so the tenants, we talked about the salary, the area median income being $80,000, that you could cap it at about 120%, which would be 96,000. So it's not, you know, if you make $1 million a year, you do not qualify for lease to locals. So
Okay.
yes, there is a salary cap, and that's how that's.
But what I'm
Honestly,
saying
that's-
is, if you don't do one and not the other.
Yeah.
Right.
You know,
both.
like,
Absolutely.
and like they have to, it's kind of a package deal, right? Like, we're gonna take care of our first responders and we're gonna do this. It's not, well, let's just do leased up locals and put everybody in the same thing, cause
Right.
that won't fix, that doesn't seem right. So I think they kinda go together.
I think that's why the three that you've kind of broken it down, we're trying to decide exactly that.
Right.
Like, were we recommending all three, and then the recommendation of not double dipping, that for city, everybody's over here, the
And make sure
stipend.
it's clear that, you know, it's not, you know, and make sure that council understands that it's not, well, let's scratch this one and just do this one.
Well,
Because
it's-
Well, they,
it works.
it'll be up to them ultimately, but that's the
Yeah, yeah.
recommendation.
As you know, it's up to them.
I know,
We
but,
hopefully will
you know, but
recommend multiple
I also
options.
know, like, you know, let's
Yeah.
take one out and think we're healthy.
I think your recommendation is that you want to offer a robust menu of options, and that all of these
Yes.
are on the table to
Yeah,
help with the
and
community.
we've had two council members at all of these meetings who are
Yes.
big advocates for this.
Yes.
So I think they also, like, if we recommend multiple options, I think they would.
And we could recommend, like, we
Also
think
want more
these
than
two
one.
options together, not one, two. I just, you know, I'd hate to see it get picked apart.
I think we just put it in our
Yeah.
recommendations really clearly on here's why we recommend this
I
together
personally
too.
like the first two options and not the third.
But once we recommend, it is out of our hands unless they take it back to us.
One more thing to
So
just
we wanna
underst-
recommend the best.
Yeah, I think the first two are incredible.
One more
I think
question.
y'all are really close to recommending something about those first two today, yeah.
I
I
like
got
the
it.
first, I like the first two and the second,
Thank
the
you.
second just adds,
Well, Allison, we can
Yeah.
we can
It does, yeah,
recommend
it does.
two things and still work on the other one, so that the other two are at least in process with them while we hash out the rest, so we don't delay the others. So if we decide we wanna do the first two tonight or recommend it, then we still can ask more questions, do more research on zoning change type things.
And we need,
So-
more outside sources coming in and actually showing up to talk about these things and discuss them.
Like who?
Like,
Who you wanna hear from?
two of your speakers bailed, on us. And I just feel like if we were to have more information,
It's not for
Don't
lack of
get
trying.
bogged
It's
down.
not.
I know. But
But
remember,
but when we think
40,000
about,
foot view,
I know.
not market
Actually, we
research.
just
You're
need
not doing
more,
market
we
research.
just need more time.
So Paula and Jen, just another question to your point there. So if we say, okay, we like 1 and 2,
Uh-huh.
and we like to, I guess my fear is that, I don't wanna say, here's our recommendation, and we're still working on number 3, what if we are working on number 3 and 4 and 5 options show up too?
We
Because I just don't know when we hand something back to council, how much more
Where's
do we?
it cut off?
Right, like I don't, if there's a number 3 zoning, I just wanna leave it open
We
to the
are
point of we.
essentially a special committee on this, so I would say it's open-ended, right? If we came up with some other options
Okay.
that we wanted to present, I think.
Emma?
And for right now, for the timeline, I think y'all are ready to vote on number 1 and number 2. Discuss number 3 today and vote on that in February, so that all of these, the 3 that you've been talking about for these last 5 to 6 months, you've had time, we've been talking about it for more than 6 months, that those 3, whatever you decide, can go to council at February meeting and be ready to discuss it the next budget year. And then there may be others that you.
Well, that's my question.
I think
Can we
that's what we
asterisk
need
it
to
with
do.
the fact that there are several other avenues we're pursuing? Can you leave it with planning
Yeah.
commission to continue pursuing these other ideas? And maybe council's gonna say, I need a comprehensive thing so I can make a decision on 1 and 2. But I'd like to just leave it open that we still have some other things to pursue and
Well,
ADUs.
I-
Or if
I-
you, go ahead.
I'm sorry, I think with, number 1, for the stipend for public safety, is that really gonna help us retain employees? If we did exit interviews on employees for the past 5 years that left public safety, would any of them say it was because of housing, I couldn't afford to live out here? Is that really gonna make a difference on attracting people and getting them to stay? That should be something we know. We already give our police take-home vehicles. That's not something that's afforded to many other people. It was a city ordinance that fire people who received the housing stipend were supposed to get a take-home vehicle, but it wasn't enforced. But I mean, I think that before we say we need to give them more money, is that really gonna help us keep people?
I had this conversation with Andrew. I asked him about this specifically. Do you think this helps to retain people? And his answer was absolutely yes, 100%.
I think exit interviews would be a fabulous thing to find
Also,
that out.
is there anything tied to that stipend aside from the fact that you get help with your housing, but is there anything tied to if you have to stay a certain amount of time, if you've received, X number of months, like you have to pay it back if you leave in a certain amount of time? Like, I don't really know. So it's
Not
just while
right.
you're here, you can take advantage of it, and if you leave, it's gone.
But there's
There's-
no, you have
there's-
to have been here at least a year kind of thing. I do think part of it too is attracting them in the first place.
Yeah, I agree with that.
That being a piece of it,
But
but
it's sort of the retention. I mean, certainly like in the way corporations work, they give you a sign-on bonus, and if you leave in the first year, you pay it back. So that's,
Well,
so,
but if they leave, they lose their house.
Right, if they
And
leave,
they-
they don't have to.
So-
well, they lose the
don't get
stipend,
more.
it doesn't mean they
Right.
lose their house.
so I think we are ready to talk about that one in particular, if you guys are to vote on it. So my first question to the commission would be, do we want to give a general recommendation to increase it? Or do we wanna say
To increase what?
to increase the stipend, the monthly amount and the amount available?
Per person.
I don't know that we need to be giving a specific amount, right?
Well, and we
You
don't have the research.
to. I think the recommendation would be
Yeah.
to increase it, and this is something that we could go talk to Andrew, who has done exit interviews and has this information in his head, that say, what do you think the amount could be? And it could be a parameter that you give to council to say, here's what we think Andrew has said, here's what, increase is the main point of what your vote will be. We want to increase this, and which way, per person, to who,
Okay. So
choose.
I think we all agree that they should increase the monthly amount total and the monthly amount available to an individual, right?
I do.
You wanna make that a motion and vote on it?
Yes, I would like to. Motion to recommend increasing the monthly stipend for public safety, to increase the total amount available and to increase the amount an individual would get.
Are we also
I'll
adding
second.
to expand to anybody, city staff, or is it still?
Well,
That'll be a separate motion. Let's
Separate
just talk
motion?
about this
I
right
was
now.
gonna say, Michael just seconded, so we can discuss
Okay.
that.
Separate them out. Keep this,
Separate them.
right now, just talk about
Okay.
increasing the monthly stipend and the amount to the individual.
Okay.
So we got a
Michael
motion and a
Norton
second.
seconded.
Talk about it. Anybody?
Any discussion on just increasing public safety monthly stipend?
Well, if we're gonna give a parameter, that would be another meeting we need to have after hearing from Andrew.
Right, I think the recommendation is to increase.
Okay,
Yeah.
then yes, increase.
Okay.
I'd like to know what the turnover is with the police department, because we hire a police officer for 90 days a year in his car, comes to our condos at 10 o'clock at night, sits in the gateway until 2 or 3 in the morning, depending on what time of year it is. All right. I go down there, well, I used to go down there a lot, but before I got in this thing. But there's a turnover in the police department. And a lot of the police, they've told, they used Folly as a stepping stone to get to a larger police department somewhere. Or to put in time towards them working towards becoming an FBI agent, or any number of things. So, I don't think you're gonna get them to commit to a certain time. And if you did, then you'd have to have a penalty.
I think,
If you tell me I have to stay somewhere 2 years,
Or payback.
Or pay it back.
or pay it back,
Well, then it would just come down to, I mean, we're talking about what, $600? Like, if I got a job, a pay raise at another place and all, I mean, I don't know.
Well,
I mean,
I'm
it's
out
like
of
if you got an
state.
$8,000 raise to go to a different place, that difference is already covered, right? So,
right?
but Eric or Andrew, one of them gave us that info already. I can't remember what the percentage was, but of turnover rate, but that it costs them $60,000 every time they have to retrain,
Right.
hire a new person and onboard them. So,
it's in the budget if they stay.
yeah.
I mean, it's in the,
It lowers the budget
Right.
if they take advantage of this and don't leave versus even if we're paying them more monthly.
Jenna, do you think Andrew would have a feel for a penalty if, you know, if that would make a difference with the stipend, if you said, okay, you know, if, do you think he would say, yeah, I think that is, I mean, he might have a feeling of, yes, that might make a difference, or no, it wouldn't, 'cause if they're leaving, they're leaving.
And it might make a
Like,
negative.
if we
don't
did the
stay a certain-
stipend and they left, say, within 2 years, or if we put a parameter on it.
Recouping. We
Just
we
like a
used to
security
try to do that at
deposit.
a couple of old businesses we worked for, recouping funds after the fact. You're
Impossible.
you're just dogging yourself down with a lawyer.
right, I think.
not gonna work.
it's- While they're here, they get it. If they don't work here,
They don't get
They
it.
don't get
I
it.
mean,
That's
It's not
You know.
like,
Makes
it's an
sense.
investment into a degree or something like
Right,
that, because
right.
those do have.
Those do have
those
penalties.
have
It's an
correct.
incentive for
Right.
them to
It's
be
It's
here.
it's just an incentive to hope that that will
It's
help
strictly an
them stay
incentive.
longer.
Right, right.
Yeah.
Okay.
We're not buying them, it's an incentive.
So we would recommend no penalty, or not even saying it, maybe council would come up with.
There isn't one now.
There
so
isn't one
we
now.
would-
I know there
We would
isn't.
just stay silent on it.
What's that?
if we
I
were-
know there isn't one now, I'm not even saying we should,
Right.
Okay,
because it'd be a nightmare collecting.
yeah.
Yeah.
We're not like the mafia, we don't have hands all over the country.
Well, most
They just
most
run it.
policemen and most firefighters have to have second jobs anyway. I don't care where they are. And I know a lot of them, and they all have some kind of second income coming in. So
Yeah.
this is just an incentive to help them be able to be here, you know, and hopefully it will help them out, not have to work other jobs so often. You
Which
know,
makes them available to be
Andrew
on
or
call.
Eric,
be on call for us.
had,
be close
we had
by
also
to
been
emergency.
told that a study was done and they are being paid similar to what they would be at another
yeah, you're right.
county,
Right.
city,
Yeah.
It was
or
comparable to other-
locally,
Yeah.
so.
Say that one more time?
Whoever talked to us, if it was Andrea or Eric, had told us they had done a study and that they were being paid comparable to other
Yes,
precincts.
the city paid a consultant to do
Right.
a salary survey, yes.
Yeah.
And has that all caught up now, or are we still catching up?
I know they addressed it at last year's budget.
Okay, so it's
And
now,
it may be this year too.
This year will then
Might
make
need
it-
some more, yeah.
okay,
But I know that council has that information
Okay,
and
alright.
has acted on it.
okay.
So does everybody feel good about, or,
So the motion
The motion is
is
to
to
increase
increase
the
the
monthly
monthly stipend to
stipend
public safety and
And
the individual amount that one person can receive.
Right.
that's right.
And
Right.
just to make sure we're on the same page, the idea is to keep the minimum number, which is 6 right now, and give at least 6 more money. So it's not like,
Correct.
that's
Under
why
no
there's,
circumstances would we want to decrease.
well, no, I'm just saying that's why there's two, number
Right.
one, number two, is that if you
Yes.
increase the amount, but for each individual and don't increase the monthly amount, you're gonna have less
Shrunk
people
it, so
getting
yeah,
you
600.
want to keep
That's
that
right.
at least the same or more, yes.
Okay.
Great,
So that's the motion?
Everybody got that? Okay.
Yeah.
we got it. Jenna, call the roll.
All right. Ms. Ray,
Yes.
Mr. O'Connell,
Yes.
Mr. Norton,
Yes.
Ms. Mumford,
Yes.
Ms. McNabb,
Yes.
Ms. Capel,
Yes.
Mr. Anderson,
Yes.
and Ms. Stubblefield.
Yes.
Passes unanimously.
Hallelujah.
All right, so then, if you want to talk about expanding who's eligible,
Right,
that
so
could be.
next, do we want to make a recommendation to say that other city employees, public works, or any other
And that number is
city-related
like
would
80.
be eligible for the stipend?
City employee.
So you're saying that's like number 79, something 80?
If you wanted to do a salary cap
So
on
we're
it.
talking about, what, 50 grand if you go 80 times
Wait, hold on.
600?
To answer your question, you're asking how many people would that encompass 79 if it was all city, all public works, all administrative, right? So that's your question, 80
If it's
people.
just like the stipend for public safety, it's a set number of money and whoever applies first gets it, and if there's not enough money, there's just, like, the other people just don't get it.
So
But
it
that
wouldn't
one I
be 600
definitely would want.
per person?
No, it's not
Not
600 per
necessarily.
person.
Okay, because that
Yeah.
comes out to like, what, 40?
Well, no, what we're saying is
Grant.
expand who's eligible for it. So public safety currently is the only
Mhm.
demographic for the city that's eligible. So the idea is discussing whether
But
we think it should be
It
opened
is
up.
correct that Public Works had it and just nobody used it, then,
It just wasn't enough.
It wasn't enough, that's what we talked to people in Public Works. It
We know
was
what the
not
average
enough
pub-
to
wait,
make-
they'd rather not get even the free money
Are we
available
sure about
than
that?
nothing?
They still couldn't afford
They
to
couldn't
live here,
get closer.
even with 600, that didn't
Okay.
give them
And
enough.
we're
to
saying
make
they
I see what you're
cannot
saying.
What
double
they
it
make.
if they had that stipend and then wanted to do lease local?
That's your decision,
I mean, why not?
that's your decision.
I'm public
No,
works
it was-
report.
You don't make enough.
No, I think it's,
Right.
I
What
would say,
all
I'm with
are
Amy
considered
on two
public
separate
works?
things.
Public
Keep
Works is
Yeah.
trash guys.
Yeah,
And they're wonderful.
and they're
Okay.
wonderful.
They are wonderful.
And then there's people like guys that drive around and give tickets to cars.
That's
No,
That's
not-
parking, that's
They're,
third party.
they're also a third
No.
party.
That's a third party that works for, it's called Park Folly, that's our, we contract that out, they are not included
Okay.
in any
No.
of this.
What about, how does everybody feel about a recommendation to offer the stipend to Public Works at a higher amount on a one-year basis to see how the program's going? Reevaluate the following year that
Yeah.
we offered them a higher amount, did anybody take it?
So right now
But
it
it
would be
would-
offered to public safety and public works.
The
Are you
motion
saying
is
to
increase
reinstate
the
it?
public-
Increase it only to
increase
Public Works,
and
yes.
see-
Well, they
Yes,
had a
okay.
separate line item, would it be, I mean, it's up to us, I guess, to say, do we wanna add them into that same program, or do they have a separate program?
Because they used to have a separate program,
But
it
what-
wasn't enough money for anybody to participate.
But
So
y'all will
what
know.
What we're
what
saying
was
is
that
we want to
number
increase that
before?
money and see if it works.
Yeah,
So
but.
would it- could we look into for sure that it was offered to city, Public Works?
It was.
Do
It's
you
been
know
in the
how
budget
long
for
ago
years.
it was?
For years, up until last year was the year they stopped it because nobody had taken
And do we
advantage
know
of it.
how much that was
Yeah, how
offered?
much
Was
was
it
It's
the
600 per person.
Okay, yeah, because I was under the impression it was only for first responders.
These are
Always.
two different pots. So the
Yeah.
first responders is the $600 per month, That's been around for a long time.
Yes,
The
yes.
Public Works one has not been around as long as the public safety, but it was a separate,
Okay.
program, the same amount, and no one has ever taken advantage of it. And so they decided in the budget to take it out. It was a separate line item just for Public Works, and that was
Okay.
taken out. It was
And,
taken
and
out
how
last
many
year.
years was it
I don't know.
available?
So I guess
Many.
the discussion point is, do we want to expand it as a first recommendation to re-invite Public Works to participate with a
Yes.
higher amount?
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
And
And
reevaluate to see,
And
okay,
visit
maybe
it
they
in a
did it.
year and see if they accepted it.
I guess, do we know, how many people is that? Of the 79, how many
How many?
people would Public Safety and Public Works entail?
Public Works is, I think they're both about 30.
That's where I was going
30 is
with
about
this.
Public Works, and maybe about 30 for public.
So if we
safety.
added city staff, we're adding another 19, 20?
City staffs, yes, under
Yeah,
20.
a lot
I
more.
feel like we might just,
I know, I'm also thinking about like, okay, the program's available, but you have to move your entire household, that's another hassle. But I mean, it,
What number are we gonna get to though?
I would
I don't think it's,
say-
even if you were to double it, I don't think it would entice them to come. So why would we suggest something that's a,
but we don't know that.
yeah, that was
Yeah,
gonna,
I
my
think
next
it's-
comment was gonna be, well, we may recommend this, that means the city now has to budget for it and take that money away from something else potentially.
yeah, and then if we do that and they can't double dip, then why wouldn't we just allow for them to go into at least a local rather than taking them out of that equation?
They still would be able to
Yeah.
do the least to
Oh, they
locals,
would.
unless y'all say they can't double dip.
I personally like where Amy was with, like, let's do a bucket over here to address public city staff, the whole group of 79, however that is. And then secondly, to address the community that's been here, that works here, that needs to work here, just separately, because if you're double dipping least local and you're getting a stipend, you're not
But it's-
helping any of the people we just heard from or anybody that's on
Well,
But then you're also putting a money pool out there that probably won't be enough to put a dent in Public Works' ability to live out here, and then you're just trapping that.
Well, I think we've gotta offer it, you gotta at least start. And then, you start that conversation and then you kinda see. is it
Around
even-
what year bracket
you know-
was it available? Around what
Public
year?
Works,
Mhm.
up until last year.
I think 4 or 5 years.
The past 4 or 5 years.
But we
In the
can't
past
say
4 or
what we
5 years,
Zero people
inflation
for,
has been like
Yeah.
through the roof,
Sure.
too, so.
sure.
I think
What is
offering
your
it isn't,
recommendation?
it's kind of harmless, is that, can I
Right.
say that? To Public Works, but I think, keep it, I think Public Safety and Public Works.
And
And
just to be-
that's that's the trial run, to see how it feels, if there's any,
Right.
if it
So-
gets anywhere.
You'll have some answers
And first,
once you see whether or not people can use it. And so I think the recommendation would be to bring back the Public Works stipend and increase the amount to see if it can be effective in that way.
Yeah.
first responders have to fill out a monthly survey, they have to turn that into Andrew, who then in turn turns it into council, of how many times they were called back, and then how many times they did respond. So what's the incentive for Public Works?
I think that this is not gonna be tied to coming back for Public Works or
So
for
I'm
the
saying,
city.
so police officer is eligible for this, and he's gotta come back, but Public Works doesn't have to come back. He's gonna go, well, why do I have to fill this out, and why do I have to come back? But they don't have to, and they're still eligible
Yeah,
for it
But I
also.
think we're still missing the real huge factor here is that even if we were to allow it in this first year or two, if there's nothing for them to rent, because there's no houses out there for the rent, then we're gonna get a result that makes it seem as though, oh, they didn't want it, but really, even with that money,
There's still nothing
there's
there.
nothing available.
But
That's
with
a
the
very good
stipend, they can be in
And
the
so it's
greater
gonna be
James
a
Island
false,
area.
Right.
it's gonna be a false result, you know what I mean?
James,
Like,
James
we're gonna-
Island housing is still available for these stipends.
For the stipend, so they could get a
So
lot
it's not just
closer,
fine.
even if they couldn't get on the island. Which,
I mean, it's gotta start somewhere. I don't think, you would hope that some of the homeowners, would take this and be like, yes, I do wanna rent to Public Safety. I do wanna, and knowing that, okay, the stipend's been increased. So, the city's sort of doing their part and maybe somebody else will. And then the Lease to Locals program comes in. I think it's it's gotta be, a lot of things have to fall into place. and a
Almost
lot of people-
simultaneously, it can't be
It-
one before the other, it's almost like you gotta do it all kind of around the same time, just to have inventory, to see if people
I
bite.
think you kind of do, but at least the locals is gonna take a year, you know, I mean, right, like to get the market research and to get all that, but the stipend could happen now, and, you know, I mean, if you, I think it's also morale too, if you offer it, and be like, hey, we really wanted to try this and do this, and maybe they move to James Island and get closer, and then, you know, as the least of locals thing, you know, happens, people start, you know, kind of getting educated of, you know, what does it look like in the long term if I do decide to rent my property? Maybe a little less than what I could get, but it's still being used, and it's giving back to my community in a sense as well.
And I think it's
So-
about making some progress on this thing too, a little bit. It's like,
Yes,
perfection is the enemy to progress at this point in time, and so what can we,
yeah.
what can we offer? I do have a question on the public works. Do we know that they are having a hard time getting to work? I mean, I know that they start doing this at 7 a.m. Do we know that there's a need to be on the island that, or no need or a want? Do we have any intel at all on if there's a need and a want? And where I'm headed with it is, if that's 60 people already, personally, I'm kind of feeling like there's 19 more people in city staff. Like, we just offer any public works, public safety, and city staff, there's 79 people. If we're already covering 60 to 65 of them with public works and safety, you know what I mean? Like, I guess I'm wondering if they're having a hard time getting to work on and off the island.
Is
No,
that an
I
Eric
think it's an
question?
excellent point.
Yeah, I don't know
The garbage
that.
guys don't need, it's not gonna take them time. I don't know what their salary is. What's their salary?
I don't know.
Even with that salary, I mean,
And to Karen's point, they're not being, so they called back.
I know.
public.
Well, and
I wanna
that's.
bring up one point. My wife is the chair, the only female chair in the history of the medical university. And since we've been here on Folly, which has been 25 years, we've tried to bring everything we can to Folly. She came out here as residency director, then she became division director, then she became department director, now she's chair of OBGYN. And she has brought every doctor that they've recruited out here, and only one bought. And it's because of schools. They want schools, so they're all going to Mount Pleasant, is where the doctors are going, and they got plenty of money. And there's plenty of nice properties out here for somebody with plenty of money. So, I think that's gonna be a big thing. I mean, are they gonna, how is this gonna affect? Is it gonna be a family, or is it gonna be $600 per person? $600 per bedroom?
The
$600
stipend is per person,
Per
per
employee.
employee.
per employee?
So are you proposing that they add across the board everyone, city employees, public works, or have them separate, in a separate fund?
I guess
see
I'm
public
throwing
works
it out
doing-
there for me, if we're talking about 60-something people, so, you know, low 60s between.
What are you saying, is 60 people?
So you said there was about 30 in each, public
Okay,
works
yeah.
and public safety, it's already 60, there's only 18, 19 more people in city staff. We already know one or two or a few that already live out here, right? So I guess I'm just thinking in general, who's gonna get the call, who's gonna be working late, who's gonna be trying to get here in the middle of a busy summer to work during the week? I personally would just say, let's just throw in the whole, the whole city, cause it's 79 instead of 60.
I think since we're increasing it and we really want it to happen, maybe you start with public safety and then you talk with Eric to see, because I think Karen has a good point, is that, you know, when they receive this money, the deal is you respond to calls. You know, you keep your radio on and you're there and you keep a log of it and stuff. And maybe that's something Eric can come up with, a program. He's like, you know what, that would help in the summer if public works guys were here and they start moving these things at 5 a.m. or something like that. Like, so maybe that's like a program, like adding them in next year, you know, once maybe there's some discussion on, well, what do we get back? You know,
What's the
as-
incentive?
What's the incentive to give it to them?
Adding something that they would be required.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah, kind of, something like that, but
Yes.
none of us know, because we don't, you know, we don't know what could help, what could make everybody, you know, all of their jobs easier by having two people live out here, or one person or something. So maybe we don't add them in just yet, we just keep it to public safety, because that's, you know, that's the kind of the low-hanging fruit, so to speak, like, what, you know, we see the benefit of that, and we have.
Do you know when we have, like, sudden utility emergency, like the water main break this weekend, is that Public Works coming to fix that, or is that they're hiring a third-party plumber type thing?
That's, it's Phil now and Kyle.
He's personally going to do it?
Kyle was on call pretty much
Yeah,
all
all
night
night.
long, all day and all night long. Yeah, that's who has to deal with it most immediately.
Does that role fall within city administrative staff or within Public Works?
Both.
So, I mean,
That's, they're public works employees, I think technically, but we consider them to be administrative because Phil's office is.
Where I was going back to like the person who's on call that handled everything, it's Kyle.
Because whoever's doing that definitely deserves it.
Right, but that's staff.
And that's a staff person.
This
yeah.
might be a deeper conversation, but the fire department,
That's public
It's-
safety.
right, so, but James Island Fire Department, they are the first for when, and this goes back to the whole land discussion. When, this might be a deeper, I might need to write in my question, but when we purchased that land to expand Folly, and we got into that bit of a lawsuit with James Island Fire Department, and they get a call. Their area of domain extends to Folly, right?
They're backup.
Backup only.
They're backup. So they wouldn't buy into this also, would they? Would they throw down to have, even though we're funneling out tons of money to them each year?
No.
This is.
And
they're
we can't
back up.
expand.
They're back
Uh,
up.
They're just.
Again, we're back to talking about how we're gonna
Yeah,
fund it.
they would
I
have
think-
their own program for their employees.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
so we discussed, recommending there be a stipend for Public Works, and if it's okay, let's go ahead and vote on that.
Okay, so this would be bringing back the public.
And
motion to bring
increasing
back-
the amount,
and
so
increasing the amount.
yes or no, all, if we want to recommend that now, if you don't, it's a no.
Polly, just for clarity, not one big bucket with the two in it, we're talking about two separate buckets, the
The
way it used to be?
stipend that there used to be, but
Okay, and increasing that amount.
Okay, so
Who all are in Public Works?
it's the people, the trash, people who pick up the trash. There's, yeah,
Mhm.
and Phil,
And then throwing in Phil.
and Phil, yeah. Which I'm not entirely sure, but I think he is considered public works, but it's one of those, he's in here.
Well, and then
as
that
a-
gets into a gray area of like, wait a minute, so then why not other city staff if you're throwing him in, but y'all can figure that part out.
Are we still
Right.
debating number one?
Number two.
I mean, I'm
No,
trying to figure out where
We've
we're
already
at.
Public
voted on
Works.
Number
number
one B,
Number one
we
B.
voted on one A.
We voted on public safety, we're now looking at public
Public
works, and
works.
motion by
Right,
Paula,
right.
is there
Yeah.
a second?
All right.
Yes,
Let's
second.
Okay. Is there any more discussion?
And this is keeping them public safety and public works separate, we're not.
The motion is to bring back the public
Bring it
works.
back, right.
Bring it
Let
back and
me-
increase the amount.
For a period of 1 year to
For 1
be
year.
reviewed
Yes,
for participation.
And per person, but also per month.
Yes, that's right.
yeah.
Thank you.
So vote.
You ready to vote?
Please
Yes.
call the roll.
Okay, Mr. Anderson.
Sorry,
Now-
I don't understand.
Okay.
Me either.
Ms. Capel,
Yes.
Mr. Norton,
Yes.
Ms. Ray,
Yes.
Mr. O'Connell,
Yes.
Ms. McNabb.
I'm kind of cynical about this answer. I'm gonna go with a yes, but I don't think it's gonna be a drop in the, I don't think you're gonna see
One.
We're testing,
anybody.
it's a test and
We're
learn.
gonna find out.
It's a test and learn.
Yeah,
Yeah. Ms. Mumford
No.
and Ms. Stubblefield.
yes.
6 yeses, the motion passes.
And finally, city employees, do we not want to address it at all? I believe many of them get a pretty good salary,
Yes.
but I don't know the specifics.
Yeah, I don't have a clue what the average salary is of
And
staff.
one thing is to consider a salary cap on this, and you could do that with any of these.
Right.
Because currently, there are no salary caps on who can get it.
Yeah, but we want the
But
new
that,
Kyle to be,
Oh,
to be
yeah.
on call. What's his name?
Do we know, you don't have to tell us who, because it doesn't matter, but do we know of the city staff, how many live on the island currently, or just across the bridge or whatnot?
In here, in the
Yeah.
administrative building,
Yeah.
about 4.
Okay. Got it.
Mhm.
And I don't know what a salary cap would look like on that, I really don't.
So if we did the AMI, the 80,000 is the area median income for
Oh, that
Charleston.
is
And
ours.
so you could use the 120%, which would be 96,000. And I can
Okay.
tell you, there are 3 people in the city who make more than that. So most
Okay.
people are.
So it'd be,
Yeah.
so it'd be open to most everybody.
I don't like the idea of
But
a
don't y'all-
salary cap
get a
on that.
increase every year? Is there a certain percentage that you get every year?
There
It's
are.
administrative employees,
Mhm.
okay,
Well, it's not a guarantee,
No,
but
it's not
it
mandated.
can happen, yes, it
yeah,
does happen.
okay.
Mhm.
And that's voted on by council,
Mhm.
correct?
Mhm.
Okay.
So that may
What
be a
would
better
we-
way for council
What
to
would
address it.
we have to do with that?
Nothing with their raises.
Right, that's
or
what I'm saying.
salary. No, this would be if we wanna open up one of these funds for them to apply to for housing costs.
I don't think a salary cap is the way to
Okay, but I guess the question that is on the table right now is, do we even think this is something we would
go.
wanna do?
I don't wanna, I would say no for that, my answer would be no on the salary
No.
cap.
Well,
Or even discussing it right now.
On the salary or
On the
administrative
salary cap or on
On,
offering
on
something to the
any
city?
type of administrative salary cap, I don't.
no, that's not what we're doing. We're talking about, would we have another fund, like for public safety or public works, that city employees could apply to for a housing stipend?
Oh,
And maybe
excuse
we
me.
would apply a cap, like if you make over this, you can't apply to this
Oh,
fund.
Right.
excuse me.
Yeah.
Excuse me.
So that's the question, is this something we want to entertain? Or if not, we'll move on.
That's what-
I just want
No, I
to
think
make
that's
sure
fair.
we've addressed all.
I do, well, is it time to discuss?
Yeah.
Mhm.
I'm all for, like, as many people that serve our city, that are a part of the community, trying to make it easier. We're back to the inventory issue again. What I also don't wanna do is spend the money in this next year before we ever even talk about everybody else, the whole other bucket of people we're talking about that have built the community, that do live in the community or work in the community. So I get worried about, I mean, I was saying expand it to all 79 just because I was thinking one bucket of money, how many people are really gonna participate?
Yeah.
But I guess we're starting to chip away at the whole other bucket, like before inventory gets eaten up and we address anybody else that works on the island,
Yeah.
F&B and whatnot. I get a little worried about that.
Yeah.
I agree. I think
Yep.
let's, I think we keep it kind of limited now, not to say that it would never be opened up, or considered, but I think right now, the biggest bang for our buck is, public safety, public works, possibly with input from Eric, would, hopefully has the most, the possibility of the most success. And then, okay, that worked, that was great, now let's, inventory gets a little, evened out, and, there could, possibilities are endless, really,
Okay.
it'd be great for everybody to live out here.
And I don't want to sound like I'm talking out both sides of my mouth. I was thinking, we have 6 right now. Let's open up the eligibility to more people. But now as we're talking about more buckets and more people and different buckets of money, we're now might be talking about 18 housing units, for
Yeah.
example, that are going to get used by
You're
this
talking
group
about
of, like-
opening this up to non-city employees?
Oh, no, not at all. What I'm saying is that I agree with Amy. I think we've addressed these 2 things right now. I would
And
love to
remember,
see.
James Island would count as
That's true.
inventory.
And then just work on providing inventory. Okay. Everybody pretty much good? All right, let's
Yes.
move on to whether or not we would like to recommend council to participate in the Lease to Locals program.
Second, give me a second.
Third.
Who made that motion? Paul?
What are we
Sure.
talking about?
Yeah.
So
So Lease to Locals now is the program that would pay homeowners directly to convert from short-term rentals to long-term rentals.
So what we're
Or
voting,
just
what we're talking
open it
about
up.
is whether we
Or have to
recommend
sign it.
council pursue that option.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Okay. You all ready?
We have a
to vote?
Yes.
motion, we have a second. Yep,
Yeah.
let's call that one.
Okay, Mr. O'Connell,
Yes.
Ms. Capella,
Yes.
Mr. Anderson,
No,
Ms. Mumford,
Yes.
Ms. McNabb,
Yes.
Mr. Norton,
Yes.
Ms. Ray,
Yes.
and Ms. Stubblefield.
Yes.
Motion passes.
It's not just STRs to LTRs, it's just also just unused buildings.
It could be a
too.
second empty, yes, a vacant home.
It could be like someone just, as their second home, just, what would it take?
Yep,
Yep, we just passes.
all right.
But again, that passes.
Okay.
So discussion now is about
ADUs.
ADUs. Now, this one, I don't think y'all are ready to have a vote on today. I think you will be next month. So I think the question is, there were some questions about the number of people that might be eligible for this, and so I can talk to you a little bit about
Yep.
that, and then have y'all discuss, and maybe come up, give me some ideas of what you're looking for. I think right now what I've heard is allowing ADUs on properties that can handle the septic and can handle the parking, and either limiting it in geographic area, like commercial districts or to
Multifamily.
multifamily, or putting a cap and saying, do a trial run of 10 homes. If there are 10 people who can put an ADU in, that they would be allowed to do that, to long-term rent and have a deed restriction that for maybe 10 years, maybe 20 years. If 20 years, it would have to be below market rental. I looked at the number of, this is based on my eyeballs. This is what, I looked at properties that had the room to put in maybe 1,000 square foot ADU on it. A lot of, say, the newer homes that have been here since the 90s, the houses are really big and they're right smack in the middle of the lot. So none of those really would qualify. So it's kind of like the old cottages where the house is on one end of the property and they have, where people have subdivided, half lots. It's basically exactly would be that, except it's still
Like mine.
considered one lot. They would just be putting in on their other property. What I came up with was about 160. And so possible, that's not considering septic. That's not considering septic.
Or parking or anything else.
Yeah.
Yeah, not specifically. I did, if they only had 1,000 square foot left, I wouldn't include that. They have to have a 1,000 square foot and meet the setbacks, so that would give a little bit of wiggle room for the park.
That was a bad.
But the septic is
I'm
gonna take.
actually surprised your eyeballs saw 100.
Yeah,
I was expecting
yeah.
a lot less. than
I
that.
kind of was expecting a lot
I
less.
have a deed restriction question. Is it legal even to say it can only ever be personal use or short-term rental unless the entire short-term rental ordinance changes?
Long-term rental.
No, like the current STR ordinance,
Yeah.
how it's limited, well, I guess maybe it doesn't matter. The deed restricted, whatever, forever.
Wait,
Sorry,
what's
tell
the
me again, what's the
question?
question?
Is it legal to require a deed restriction that is basically forever?
It's certainly been talked
Forever.
about a lot, so.
Maybe not forever, 99 years.
I've seen 99, I've seen Charleston do 99 years.
99 years.
So there's something, okay. There's something called, oh man, I can't remember what it's called. It was the worst, concept to come up with in law school for the bar. And it's how long you can restrict a property, and it is 99 years.
Oh, okay. Because
I'll-
I don't want anything with a
It's been a long
10-year,
time
20-year
ago.
deed restriction.
Me either.
That's working for us.
Let me think about, I gotta come back and think
Well,
about
are we
what that
sitting at this
was.
table talking about it 10 years from now?
What's that?
So I wouldn't want any really short-term deed restriction, like 10 or 20 years.
You would not want
Like,
to.
yeah, she's saying it's not even worth discussing.
Yeah,
If we're-
'cause
if we're
we'll
talking
just
about
be
10 or
talking about
20
it again.
years,
Right.
we're back to the same conversation.
Anyway, so
Sure.
it is possible to
It is
do one
possible
that
to do
long.
longer than that, yes.
So
What is that?
I'll tell y'all, I kind of veered away from ADUs personally, where what I would love to happen is that in the residential single-family district, which is most of the island, that you would be able to build a regular attached duplex with that deed restriction on it. And you could live in half of it if you want and rent out the other half, or you could rent out both units. But it would not be short-term rental, it would only be long-term rental.
And that's for new construction?
I was
For
gonna-
new-
So are you
well,
saying
I
that
mean-
somebody could tore down their own house to build a duplex? Or they could add on to their
Or they
existing
bought a
house?
lot and built one, or yeah, they could add on too, it would still meet that requirement, it just, they'd have to change their deed to say,
I don't think you'll get
Yeah.
them
So,
to do that.
You
so
don't?
That's
the,
not gonna
it would
work.
be
I think
allowing
that
a
if it
second
was a
unit
separate unit, they
in
would.
single-family,
yeah,
allowing a second unit in single-family districts, whether that is new construction, building a duplex, or adding on to a current house with the deed restriction of X number.
But you're
of
saying
years.
attached to the existing
But it's
property
gotta
or
be
to the same property,
bigger
not a
walls?
separate unit in the back of the house, standalone? Is that what
I'm
you're
thinking
calling
of
duplex?
allowing people to build a duplex.
Okay.
Versus, based on these answers to the survey, people are like, it's not worth the cost to do it, or I don't wanna do it on my lot, and it's just the not in my backyard thing, like, yeah, of course I would love for that to happen, but I'm not gonna do it, and I don't want next to me, don't want one next to me either, so,
Well, how many lots are there available to do that?
well, she's
Empty
saying
lots.
Like
like,
100.
Well, she was saying
to build a new
ADU.
one,
Yeah, yeah,
yeah, not a lot.
not a
Well,
lot,
I mean,
so.
But you
but
could
that
add
would
on.
include tearing down a current
Yeah,
house and allowing
tear down
a
one and build
bunch of
one.
rebuild.
I
It's
don't
just
see a lot of
another,
Oh,
another
right.
potential solution, but,
And these are two separate things that you can
Yeah,
include
but it sounds like
separately.
maybe y'all don't like.
I'm just trying to
Just
wrap my
find
head
it.
around the concept, cause I've toyed with this idea, would somebody be willing to open up half of their house?
Oh, that
And
brings
then
me to
let
another
it-
question. On existing houses,
Let's take one at a time.
well, this is a question for Jenna, that on an existing house, can you can long-term rent a room in your house out to someone?
Mhm.
You don't have to get like a license or anything?
You have to get a license.
You have to get a license?
But
But it's by
there-
right, you get it.
There's not a cap on those or
Yeah.
anything, so
Yeah.
you can do it now. But I think the difference is whether you were, like, I have an upstairs, we don't use much of the upstairs. If I wanted to create a separate entrance for that and turn it into 2 rooms instead of one big master room, do we have, am I allowed to do that now? Is that considered an ADU on the existing footprint or not?
No,
Like
because you
inside your
can't
house?
add the
Well,
kitchen
it's-
thing, because of the
Yeah, 'cause you
situation
have
with the
a-
kitchen.
Right, so I can't add a kitchen to make it its own unit. I have a second floor, we don't use a whole life. And I'm not saying I'm going to, but
But if it's
trying to
inside
figure
your
out
house,
how-
that's still your house, that's not accessory.
right, and that's what I was saying, is that to
Whereas
make
It's
it,
a
duplex
separate,
would have
a
a-
separate unit.
and I still can't add a second kitchen in an existing house anyway, so
Right.
it couldn't happen.
But if you were allowed to have duplexes,
If you're
you could.
building a duplex from scratch or tearing down your existing house and turning it into a duplex.
Yeah.
I think we can already do that though, right?
Not a duplex, not a
Not a
single
duplex.
family.
Oh, that's right, okay.
So the ADU, I don't love, only because of environmental reasons.
Yeah.
And
Ditto.
I just don't, it's just, and maybe on that lot it would work, but then you think the house next door or across the street and all of a sudden they're getting flooded. It's just, I just don't see how we have room, to allow people to have multiple. Also, in, looking down the road as far as managing that, I feel like we might create a problem, like trying to solve a problem. And truly, would there really be that many? I mean, I know eyeballing 160 maybe, but to consider septics and all that,
It's
there's,
gonna shrink that.
yeah, it's gonna
lot.
cut it down. So I just don't know if there's that much to gain for what we could lose.
And
So
Amy,
what I would say about the environmental impact is that if somebody wanted to come right now and build a 6-bedroom house that covered 35% of their lot, they could do that if they had the septic capacity. What we're saying is somebody who has a 3-bedroom house right now only covering 20% of their lot, can they use 3
The
more
rest of
bedrooms
it.
and 15%? I mean, it's not
Right.
giving them anything necessarily more than that 6-bedroom house.
Right.
And so you could restrict it in that way. So
Well,
you're
and I
not
think-
saying 50% coverage, still stick within 35% coverage.
Right, it's still
You can do
the
that.
same amount of lot coverage, and again, I think this is how we talked about it before, is really carefully managed, like, because it's just, I just feel like it could just get out of control and all of a sudden you've got, all these little things popping up. But the duplex idea, I mean, maybe, I mean, and it would have, but you'd have to be pretty tight on, is it only for new builds, or we're not increasing, but, you know, or if not, you're not increasing the lot size, you know, or like
Right.
the lot coverage
But
or
like
anything,
Kristen
so it's
said, with
still.
her house, she could potentially renovate a second floor into that.
Right, and
without
but you also
adding to.
still have to, you know, be mindful of flooding, like you can't go below, you know, can't be the downstairs, you know, it has
Yeah.
to be above, you know,
But
and all that.
wouldn't get
So-
permitted anyway if they put in a.
Right.
reverse
And you
floor.
couldn't get flooding.
Right, but I'm just saying, you know, like you could see, you know, I don't know, like I think it's a big discussion.
And
That's
did
not
you already
just-
find out that we don't have a map of septic, we don't know how many septics there are here, we've no way to track this, like the septic situation. We talked about that a couple meetings ago, didn't you say we don't have,
Yeah,
The
DHEC
data.
keeps those records and they don't have the greatest records.
I mean, you could just go pretty much second block, all that way is all septic.
I know.
You know, so how many of those you eyeballed, you know, you could probably take over half of them out, because there just wouldn't be room for the septic and the drain field and
At
all
least,
of that.
and the ability to perk.
Right, right, all of that.
Big,
Right,
issue here. That's-
right. It's a, I don't know, I mean, it might give you a temporary solution, like, okay, now we've got all these, but, you know, so maybe duplex is the thing, but even
I
that
think
is.
it's another avenue, so it
Right.
could be, so it still fall within our current guidelines for
Right, you're not
construction.
adding,
Right, you're not adding
density.
more,
Right, so if you
I
stick
mean,
with
you're
the
adding
35%.
a couple parking places,
Mhm.
but your building couldn't be bigger than it already
right,
maxes out at.
right.
Regardless of, we don't have a lot of lots for new construction, we do have plenty of houses that could be renovated that way if somebody was so inclined.
Tell
So,
me real quick what the interest, I remember at last meeting you said something like, according to Folly, duplexes and ADUs are considered, like whether they share a wall or not, right now,
duplexes can be two separate units, they don't have to be one.
so if somebody
building.
wanted a duplex, they don't have to share a wall. They could share a gate,
Well,
they
they can
could
be-
share a fence and
But
be
if-
considered a duplex.
It
I
can-
would say if we recommended this, I would say they have to share a wall.
I agree, that's
Not-
one,
The
one
duplex you
building
share a wall.
with two
So,
units.
but
That's what a
technically you would have
duplex
to
is.
specify
It's
that?
traditionally what a duplex is,
But
but
is
in
it
Folly, a
everywhere else
duplex
in
can
the
be
world?
two separate buildings on one
But
lot,
like the one
but
by the
only
post
in
office?
multifamily or two-family, not in single-family.
Oh, okay.
That's the
Because
big thing.
duplexes right now aren't allowed.
Duplexes are not allowed, period,
Right, only
in
the-
single-family.
But also, we don't even have that defined, what a duplex, because
Well, yeah, we
We
do.
would-
but
you
we
would
do.
have to define.
If you wanted to, if you
If
wanted to
you
define
wanted to
it
do
that
it
way,
this
you
way,
could.
you would
could-
have to define.
You could,
what it
or
is.
you could not, you don't have to, but you could, and that's what I think I'm hearing. is
And you're
that
saying that you would
want to
wanna
make it
define it,
one
right now it's
structure.
not
Single
defined.
structure.
Sharing a wall.
Yeah.
If,
So-
in that district though, specific to that single-family
And
district.
you can also cap the number, so if there were 100 people who could do it, you don't want 100, you could say only 10 people in the first year or something like that. So the two things I want to point out are, that I think I'm hearing is you are concerned about the environmental impact, you're concerned about the septic. Leave the same 35% lot coverage rules and don't expand those, because that's when you're giving the opportunity for more flooding and more environmental impacts. If you leave it to what's currently allowed, whether they do a 6-bedroom house or a 3-bedroom with an ADU or a duplex or whatever you decide, I think that's limiting that aspect. And as far as the density or the massing, I think for ADUs, remember, they will have to be raised. Right now, an accessory structure such as a shed has a cap of 15 feet in height from grade.
That'd
But
be
if it is,
raised.
if it is a residential, a dwelling unit, then it has to be raised, and so you are talking about what you can see visually will be more density.
And another consideration I thought about was like, are we gonna have a bunch of people apply to do this? But then they're really just like letting their kids or their mother-in-law live there instead of actual providing rental to the community versus saying, well, yeah, I just always wanted to have a mother-in-law suite so that they can stay there when they visit. So that's where it would get really hard to police to be like,
It wouldn't just be for visiting, they'd have.
That would be
to
where the deed restriction would come in.
yeah.
Mhm.
And
But,
I mean,
Well,
a
I guess how do you
resident is a
monitor it?
resident,
yeah,
they're
we gotta tell
contributing
people,
to the
your
community.
family
at
can't stay there.
Yeah, how do you
You know?
police that? I'm having a hard enough time policing the rules.
Well, would it really, I mean, a resident of Folly is a resident of Folly. If somebody wanted to call it a long-term rental, it's deed restricted, a resident is still a member of the community.
But-
Whether it's a
But it's not
relative or not.
helping the existing
Exactly.
community.
Or is it? I mean, I've got right next to me, I've got a neighbor that rents to his daughter and she's in a ADU, I guess you call it, right?
I would wanna make sure
Garage
that
or-
we're really protecting the spirit of the whole initiative at the end of the day is about providing housing for like, I understand what you're saying, I'm not saying your mother-in-law wouldn't be a resident. But providing solutions to the problem that exists right now is different than letting my mom move in. For me, and I'm not saying my mom might not need to move in with me one day, but we're trying to address the spirit of the initiative in general that I feel like we need to be protective of.
And so if your mom moves in with you, that's not a separate unit, that's, you
Well,
know,
What I'm
Right,
saying
but
is
if
it
she
could
moves
be.
into the separate unit.
Okay.
Right.
Okay.
So we allow it to happen, and then it's not actually providing housing for some of our workers here on the island
Yeah.
or long-term residents.
That's where that would get hairy. and I
Are we
prefer-
trying to solve this ADU today, or is this just a
No, we're
topic?
talking about it.
This
So
is
another
discussion.
thing is, if we do
Table
recommend
it.
this, I would wanna say we did limit like a pilot program of 5 maybe, and just see if it applies at all.
I'm
But-
still not wrapping my head around the concept of the whole, I get why we're so concerned about the septic, I get the septic concern. But why is that same concern not applied to the houses that are 6 something, 8 bedroom? So if they were built up until this point, then as long as the septic can hold it, then what would, I'm still not understanding what the big deal
Well, I think
is.
when you think overall ADUs, you know, in talking about it with keeping the same setbacks and the same amount of lot coverage, that protects that. So in order to allow any sort of ADU or any sort of duplex, you would have to, you know, to maintain the same lot coverage, the same setbacks. Nothing gets increased. It's just a matter of you build a smaller house so you can have this extra thing. That probably wouldn't be environmentally you know,
Right,
that
I
probably
mean, if
wouldn't
we're
hurt
having this
things.
huge
But
show of
if,
stuff.
if you already have a house with, again, that's where it goes, so it just has to be really carefully managed. You know, if you have, you know, a 4-bedroom house that's teetering on and they're like, ooh, I can do an ADU now, I'm gonna do it, and all of a sudden there's one, you know, because they have the lot covered, they still have room on their lot. You know, it's just you've gotta look at the septic, you've gotta look at a lot of things, and I think that's why a lot of people, you know, are initially would not want an ADU, and there are a lot of, you know, because they see what happens, it just gets crammed on the lot. But carefully managed, same setbacks, I mean, because there really is no difference in a 6-bedroom house versus
Right.
a 3-bedroom or a 2-bedroom. But
But
you
you're
just
still
have to make sure it's, you know, the facts are out there as far as
And
how.
we know
You're
it's
still
gonna
adding
be a
more-
diamond, I mean, and we know it's gonna be just, I mean, once you got 100, once they actually come down to these parameters, it might be 10. It might
But
be
let
15.
me interrupt real quick, just what Amy said, because we have a benchmark of what we have today. So if you have a 3-bedroom house that already exists, we're talking about adding another 1 or 2 bedrooms in an ADU to the septic that exists already. It is adding more density, which is more flushes and
It's
more.
adding more density,
So
but it's not
I
giving them permission to do anything bigger than another person could do in a single.
And for
And
that,
it's not-
I
And
mean,
so
it would
you
be
could
fair.
do that, you could say, well, if you add an ADU, we're gonna give you another story that you can add, or we're gonna let you build to the setback to the property line. And those things would definitely increase the environmental impact. So I think it's a fairness issue of what a 6-bedroom person can do, or what a 3-bedroom can do with
And we're still limited at 3,600 square feet at the end of the day, right? I mean,
for a standard size lot.
standard size lot. And I don't
see
trust the
that.
fact we don't have really good environmental data.
But in doing that, if you were to apply for a permit to do an ADU, say, you would have to, you know, you would already know what that septic is in there because the house is already there. So, you know, like, and if the house is already somewhat maxed out, then you can't do it. You know, but if it's a smaller house and there is still room, then yes, you could. You know, you're not, So, but, and I don't think it's very many, really, that would even be, it's definitely not on
It
the east
wouldn't,
side,
But let me tell you my
Um,
issue with the septic for it can hold this much for a house. Why do we have issue with it? For me, where I live down on the east end, we get bad storms, tropical storm type stuff. Our yard, our neighbors' yards, a lot around there are completely flooded, so all those septic tanks are inundated. They're not completely airtight. There's definitely waste getting into that water.
yes.
So that's just adding more potential waste. I think that's what my issue with adding more septic would be.
Or even just more people on the same property at the end of the day, because that's what I was trying to get with the benchmark. I understand that maybe the septic is available to a 6-bedroom house, but there are only 3 bedrooms in the house right now. The number of people tearing down their existing house and rebuilding something else, I don't know what the number is, but I think you'd have more people interested in adding ADUs than you'd have someone tearing down their house and doubling the size of it within that.
We have about
3,600.
25 people a year who tear down a house and build a new one.
25?
Mhm.
Oh, maybe I'm off on that.
Shame on
We're coming.
And, oh, by the way, I have to
There
slip
are-
out, guys. I don't know if- Is it okay to leave a meeting early?
Yeah.
I hate to do that, but
Let me just make a quick observation. There are engineering solutions for the septic system thing that are already being impacted, or are being done on the
Yeah.
island. That increase capacity, that is a requirement in the permitting process when they're building any additions to the current footprint. We see all the time applications to do things that are denied unless those thresholds are met under the new engineering standards. So there are new evolving engineering solutions for septic systems that are out there. You just gotta build that in, and that's what the council has to do. They gotta build in those requirements for any of this stuff to move forward.
And we already see about, I don't know for sure, but I'd say at least 50% of new septic tanks are engineered systems. So and that takes up less space in the lot. It's also
I think if
much
it's a
more
shot in the
expensive.
dark,
Much more
and if you wanna do 10, a quantity of 10 pilot program to see if anybody would take. I think the main thing is it gonna be economical for someone to build this and then long-term rent? I think you're gonna have more drawback from the cost of building this and being deed restricted into a long-term rent. I don't think they're gonna make their money back. That's what. I mean, I think if they can and they can build it in a way where they make their money back, I wouldn't be concerned about the septic as long as it's within the standards and within the codes and within the parking and the, if property has it, it's gonna be so small, like, the amount of properties that can actually do this are gonna be so small.
So are we going to
That
recommend
if
the
we
council
allow
that
it,
they
we
look
can
at
see what
AEDs or
happens.
not?
No, we're not voting on that.
You're not
Right.
voting on it tonight.
We're just discussing.
The discussion is the
which way we want to go.
parameters.
I think
If
this
you
would be
were-
a good opportunity for a speaker who's educated in some of these questions to
Do
come
they-
in and educate us on what the capabilities would be.
Didn't you say they allow them downtown Charleston,
Allow,
ADUs?
they are very, very limited to, if you live on the lot, live in the, you have to live there to allow an ADU, and there's only a very small zoning district.
I'm like, isn't that what we want then?
Yeah, they do, their limit is by, zoning district, so they say if you live in this certain neighborhood, you're open to
Okay.
it, they don't listen, they don't have a number.
I think you can find a quantity of 100 is gonna drop drastically
absolutely
when
will.
you
It
actually
absolutely
get to,
will.
can
But
it be
the
done?
question
And
for y'all-
then the big question is, why would I do it? You know, is it gonna be financially feasible for me to do this and then profit off of it?
But that's-
Probably not.
That's not, you're not deciding whether somebody can do it, you're deciding if
I
you
know,
want
but
to
I always
open
look at
this
the
up.
dollar bill, and
so
I
the-
think that if you allow, if you say, okay, well, we'll try for 10, I bet you'll get one bite, maybe.
Sure.
But that's one bite.
But y'all's discussion is gonna be about what parameters you want to put on that, whether it has to be a unit that has one structure, or whether you're allowing it as a separate ADU, and if whether you're saying they have to stay under the 35% in the current. So those are the discussions that you need to have.
We need more time for that one.
Oh yeah, you're not voting on it today, but those are the kind of things to talk about that will be the parameters for this motion before
Okay.
it goes to back to council.
All right, we're losing our quorum.
Okay,
So, please, everybody, really think about really how you feel about ADUs or other zoning changes, because that's gonna be.
so,
We have 2 ordinances
Yeah.
not related to this next month. So, do we push ADUs off another month? course, I don't know what's coming from council
I
either.
I'd like to see where the budget falls this year and then talk about ADUs.
I recommend in February, we start with the two ordinances that are before you, that's the seawall and the gravel. If that takes 2 hours, then maybe not go into
Yeah.
affordable housing, but let's go ahead and put it on the agenda to finalize, or to talk more, discuss
Okay,
about
and
this.
if we need to
ADU.
table it
And if
for
you don't
time, we
have,
can do that.
if you don't have a consensus or you don't have an idea of
Okay.
how to continue, that's fine too.
Okay.
I'll look
We need
to
a
see-
speaker.
I'll try to find somebody, I don't know who that person is.
And Jen, I think maybe if you run across any articles or anything like that, like that might be worthwhile, like talking about ADUs and, you know, and all that, like, I don't know. I feel
Construction
like
crews,
there's-
environmentalists, we need a few speakers probably on this one.
Well,
Sorry to interrupt, Amy.
there's something out
yeah,
there.
we don't need the construction environmental part.
Well, that's again getting into just the big picture here.
I know.
Yeah, this is
Step-
just.
take a
do we
step back.
wanna-
Sorry.
No. All
It's
right.
hard to recommend stuff if you don't know the details of it.
Yeah, but they get to, council gets to decide those details. We're just saying, is this a program we want them to offer or not? If I went based on the survey, I'd say no, because all these people said, no, I wouldn't do that on my lot. The people that filled it out, but
Hi, Greg, be careful.
that's my opinion. Are there any, commission comments besides ADU? No? Staff?
I don't have anything.
Well, this is the most well-attended planning commission meeting we've had so far.
No. Motion to adjourn.
Second.
All right. Thank you, everyone.
Yes.
Dave talked to you about something that we were working on.
Did he talk
Yeah, I have
I asked him to talk to you instead of me because I didn't want to seem like I was neglecting you.
See you, Kevin.
The idea was to set up
Are you still willing to serve on the trust?
promote all of the 5 major
Yeah,
clubs.
yes, he did talk to me about that.
This is the sure I'm trying to put together for you.
Okay,
So this is a draft
okay,
table
okay, okay.
of your section here.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I just put in some
It's an
stuff.
iterative
This wasn't
process,
bad.
but it's a good one.
You know, I think we got to be committed. That would be your panel, and
Okay.
you could put the whole thing, give you an idea how the thing
Do our
would
thing.
sort of look.
Okay.
This is the first draft.
I had a hard time doing community, though.
Did you talk to Dave?
I've never done
No,
that.
I'm gonna try to get tomorrow. He sent me a whole bunch
Communion,
of
I said I
questions.
had a hard time doing communion, I've never done it.
We just
One of
need
the
to read
things
the
I'm saying,
thing.
we need to let people bring
Page
their
12
own
and 13.
members in. And I was gonna say, well, that should be open, so we would both agree on that.
The survey
Yeah, we
still
could,
shows, you know.
I know, Chris Bazell is trying to work with us on that. The
I
problem
don't have 10
with,
by 10
Is it 'cause
stuff.
of Google
well,
and
it's
not?
two different
whole
things.
idea.
I'll look for somebody else.
And then it's Facebook.
They would be
If we
this
shut down
folder,
the
it'd
Facebook
be about.
site, we lose historically everything that's been done. So
Seems
we're
like we could
trying,
just change the name on that.
Represents you, the Halloween, or
if we've changed
Hey,
it.
Jenna, we're still recording.
people could look at that, and it'd be this.
Okay, so we'll see ya.